that puts you against a car or a wall. With a bear hug, we showed you a precise technique how to reach his nose, hair if he got, and then neutralize the guy and take control of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining our Krav Maga class. You guys can stay tuned and check out our Facebook and YouTube page and learn more Krav Maga tips and lessons. Thank you.
Turn up the volume. Hi, this is Moshe Leon, Mayor of Jerusalem. If you are looking for a new place to call home, Jerusalem, the beating heart of Israel, a city of history, culture, and innovation, is a city for you. My team and I are waiting for you with many special benefits for new residents. Now is the time. Make Aliyah.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel with your top headlines from across the region. It's 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Sivan Raviv, and these are the latest developments coming to you live from Israel. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas announced they would be transferring an additional hostage body to Israel tonight. In Gaza, the IDF says its forces eliminated 4 terrorists along the Yellow Line. In Rafah, troops spotted armed operatives emerging from underground tunnels. 3 were killed with no injuries to Israeli forces. In Han Yunis, another terrorist who crossed into Israel-controlled territory was neutralized. These gunmen are among roughly 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding in what the army calls the terror pocket in Rafah. Additional strikes targeted houses and infrastructure used for militant activity as Israel and the United States continue discussions on deporting those still in the tunnels. Meanwhile, in the north, the IDF struck multiple Hezbollah terror sites embedded near Lebanese civilians, another example, Israel says, of Hezbollah's use of human shields. Troops also hit an additional terror position as the group attempts to rebuild its capabilities. The IDF says it will continue acting to remove threats on both fronts and defend Israeli communities. After 5 years at the helm, Mossad Director David Barnea will step down in June 2026. Barnea notified Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of his intention to resign, according to Channel 12 in Israel, with the Prime Minister's office confirming that the process to select his successor will begin in the coming weeks. 3 candidates are currently in the running, 2 senior officials from within the Mossad, including Barnea's deputy, and the Prime Minister's military secretary, Major General Roman Goffman. The selection will involve interviews and detailed evaluations by the Prime Minister, followed by an organized transition period to ensure a smooth handover of responsibilities. Barnea, who requested not to extend its tenure, leaves a legacy of high-profile successes, including the pager operation against Hezbollah and operations deep in enemy territory. His 5 years at Mossad have been marked by strategic achievements and strengthening Israel's intelligence capabilities across the region. Former hostages Aviva and Keith Siegel testified before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, recounting their harrowing experiences in Gaza. Aviva Siegel, held for 51 days, told of young female hostages who were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. She described the trauma these girls faced, including being threatened with death if they spoke out. Aviva's testimony highlighted the brutal conditions and crimes committed against hostages, bringing international attention to Hamas's treatment of captives in Gaza. The Siegel statements come as part of global efforts to document abuses and seek accountability for the terror attacks of October 7. Let's take a listen.
I'm a witness of one of the girls that was with us, that the Hamas terrorist took her into the bathroom, told her to get undressed, came into the shower with her, and forced her to do oral sex on her. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was forced to take a shower She's 16 years old. She's never ever showed anybody her body. The Hamas terrorist just stood there and stared at her and smiled.
One of the terrorists held a pistol to her head and told her that if she does not confess, he will kill her. I don't know what my state of mind was during this time. In retrospect, I feel like the terrorists had complete control over me. They told me what to do and I did it. The memories of the situation that I was in haunt me to this day.
Horrendous. U.S. President Donald Trump has sent a letter to Israeli President Isaac Herzog requesting a full pardon for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in his ongoing corruption trial. Trump described the case against Netanyahu as a political, unjustified persecution and called on Herzog to let Bibi unite Israel by pardoning him. He praised Netanyahu as a formidable and decisive wartime prime minister and said his leadership was crucial in the recent peace efforts in the region. Herzog's office responded that any pardon request must follow established legal procedures and can only be submitted by Netanyahu or his family, a step that has not yet been taken. The letter follows Trump's November 2nd comments on CBS News, where he said his administration would help out with Netanyahu's trial. He also spoke about this in his Knesset speech. Let's take a listen.
Hey, I have an idea. Mr. President, why don't you give him a pardon? Give him a pardon. This has been one of the greatest wartime presidents, and cigars and champagne, who the hell cares about that?
Trump's latest move has sparked political debate in Israel. National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir supported Trump's call, while opposition leader Yair Lapid reminded that Israeli law requires an admission of guilt before a pardon can be granted. Netanyahu thanked Trump for his support in a post. Netanyahu faces corruption charges in 3 cases, including breach of trust, fraud, and bribery. Joining me now to discuss this is Professor Gerald Steinberg of NGO Monitor. Hi, Gerald. Can you hear us, Gerald? Thank you for joining.
Yes, I can hear you.
Gerald, let's start with, the breaking headline for the past 24 hours. President Trump directly urging Israel's president to grant Prime Minister Netanyahu a pardon. From a legal standpoint, how unusual is this level of foreign intervention in Israel's judicial process?
As far as I know, it's nothing like this has ever happened before. It's unique. It's unique. Trump is unique. The situation is unique. And it's this kind of intervention is something that Trump does. It's part of his tactics, his strategy. It catches everybody off guard. If this were to happen, and I think there are very strong limitations to it, but if this were to happen, then Netanyahu would even be more beholden to Trump, perhaps would be more malleable to Trump's demands. And it would also be, I think, a very major problem for Israeli democracy, for the Israeli legal system, which has plenty of its own problems right now. This is not another one that I think Israel needs to add to it. So there needs to be some other solution that has to be found.
What do you personally think of this kind of intervention by Trump?
It bothers me as an academic who's taught politics for over 40 years. And I have to say, it would be much harder for me now to teach American politics or international politics in the era of Trump and everything else, social media, everything else that's going on. But this kind of very blatant intervention is a form of patronage, of sort of patronizing and condescending to the Israeli political system. Trump does it with the American system, so it's not surprising. But the whole point of Zionism is to be an independent people to determine our own destiny with our own institutions. And we have to take this as our issue, as an Israeli issue. So I don't think that it would help Netanyahu, it would help Israel for a pardon to happen because of Trump. As opposition leader Lapid pointed out, and many others have said, that a pardon, according to the Israeli legal system, has to be requested by the person who is being pardoned. And as part of that, there would have to be some sort of admission of guilt, which I don't see Netanyahu is doing, because as prime minister, he feels, and he's made a very strong case, that the charges are very political. This does illustrate the politicization of the Israeli legal system. and also in some ways the lack of, in some ways, professionalism. Many high-level political people have been brought to trial, and the trials have been dismissed, or the accused have been found not guilty. There have been exceptions to that too. There have been other cases, like a former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who was convicted for major acceptance of major bribes in terms of the what's called the Holy Land Hotel, or the Holy Land complex, housing complex in Jerusalem. So this is a different kind of case. It doesn't involve nearly those types of sums of money and influence. And as I have not been convinced by the evidence that's been presented that these are really high crimes, and really that Netanyahu should be deprived of his liberty or his position politically. He's also been elected at least once, if not twice, after the claims, after the prosecution filed its indictment. And the Israeli public seems to say, okay, but this is not a reason. Those claims, those accusations are not reasons to prevent Netanyahu from being prime minister. Look at all his accomplishments. So again, a pardon probably won't solve any of this, and would actually very much, I think, weaken already troubled Israeli political and legal system.
So, if I understand correctly, under Israeli law, the president has pardon authority, but not in the middle of an active legal proceedings. Do we know of a legal or political precedent which exists for a request like this?
Well, first of all, you would have to require that the prime minister or his lawyers would have to admit some form of guilt and say, nevertheless, he should be pardoned for national interest, for the national interest. And this is not about to happen. The second aspect of this is as you said, it's an ongoing trial. I think in that case, there's enough flexibility in the Israeli legal system for a pardon to take place and certainly if Netanyahu were to accept some guilt, some responsibility on some of the charges, and the judges were therefore able to say, okay, we have a plea bargain, and then the president could enter in and say, now we can stop the plea bargain and we can agree to a pardon. But again, I find all those steps to be far-fetched and very problematic in and of themselves. I think the best thing would be for a speedy end to this trial, and perhaps the judges, looking at the evidence, will reach the conclusion that, in fact, it does not support the conviction on the allegations that are made, both the cigars and champagne that Trump likes to allude to, and I think he can say that he's done worse than that. And it's important to remember that Trump was impeached, didn't prevent him from running for president and getting elected a second time. So he's got experience with these sorts of issues. And also, the other issues are much more blatantly political. The media, the claims of having manipulated the media, well, the media is very political, and therefore the process does fall under the category of the political process. Is it therefore justifiable in terms of allegations of violating law? I think the judge will have to reach some sort of conclusion on that. But I'll say, as a private citizen, I'm not convinced.
So theoretically, a pardon can be granted to someone who has pleaded guilty to their offenses. But like you mentioned, this is not the case with Netanyahu. He has never pleaded guilty.
Not yet. That's right. Again, I think the way I understand it, they'd have to reach a plea bargain. He could plead guilty to one or two of the minor charges and have the rest dismissed. And the judge has already told the prosecution on a number of occasions that some of the cases that have been brought do not seem to be supported by the evidence, and perhaps they should reconsider the whole process, and that they haven't done. So there may be some room for that I'm guilty of taking cigars and champagne. That should not be grounds for this type of political trial and for any kind of sentence. And that would plead guilty. The judges would make their decisions. And then, again, we're talking about a very speculative process. It's plausible, but I don't think it would be very good unless all the pieces were in place and it was an easy deal to agree to from all the different actors, the judges, the prosecutors, Netanyahu, and the other people in that framework, in the legal framework, and also President Herzog. And it would then, if the trial were to end, I think it would make Israel much more governable. And then the question would have to be raised, when does Netanyahu decide? It's his decision. When is he going to decide that he's had enough time as prime minister and he needs to pass the baton into somebody else? And then the question is who that might be. It's another major set of questions.
And that question certainly remains. Gerald Steinberg, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The IDF is conducting a huge two-division exercise in Judea and Samaria in what was described by the army as an unprecedented drill for operation readiness on the Eastern Front. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise involving the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade, accompanied by Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. During the visit, he held a situational brief with field commanders and underscored the importance of operational readiness. Zamir said the exercise is the first of its kind in the IDF. It tests the new Eastern Division, established as a lesson from the war. One of the lessons from October 7th is that responsibility for defense and Israel's security concept must change. The IDF will prevent threats while they are forming. Zamir said we must act to neutralize the threat before it reaches our doorstep. We will reinforce forces when needed to continue disrupting terror and prevent the next attack. The IDF chief also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians. A video from a recent attack on an industrial zone near the village of Beit Lid shows dozens of settlers setting vehicles on fire. Secretary of State Marco Rubio expressed an American concern regarding clashes between settlers and Palestinians in the West Bank. Joining me now to speak about Judea and Samaria is Ishai Fleischer, spokesperson for the Jewish community of Hebron. Thank you, Ishai.
Thank you.
Ishai, I want to begin with security in Judea and Samaria. The IDF just carried out its largest exercise in the West Bank, simulating mass-scale attacks and infiltration attempts. What does this tell us about Israel's new operational mindset since October 7th?
I think it tells us more about the jihadist mindset. I think that the army is actually concerned about towns like the one I'm in right now in Judea being taken over by so-called Palestinian jihadis. And a kind of breakout out of their nearby towns and takeover of our town. And that is what the army is concerned about. And so they have this Eastern Division, they have this big drills, and they're practicing a situation where there's a breakout from an Arab village. They go, with their Toyota, the Toyota trucks that we saw on October 7th and take over a Jewish town and start mass killing or start holding it back from the army. And so that is the reality of life in Judea and Samaria, where you have jihadism, the kind that took over in Gaza before October 7th and then broke out on October 7th. That reality exists out here as well. And the army's concerned.
Ishai, you can hear me? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you great.
Okay, it cut out for just a moment. Okay, keep going. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said that Jews living in Judea and Samaria face a reality where there's Arab villages that have succumbed to the ideology of jihadism, and that same jihadism is what we faced on October the 7th. So we've given away a chunk of land in Gaza. It became jihadist, and then they attacked us from it. That's exactly the scenario which the army is concerned about that could come out of Arab villages in Judea and Samaria. And so the army is prepared for that, or more prepared for that than it used to be in the past. The concept now is more operational readiness for such an eventuality, and also the towns have their rapid response teams and are ready to push back such an incursion.
And how does it make you feel that the IDF is now adapting its strategy to match emerging threats from Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and even Iranian-backed networks in this region of Judea and Samaria?
Well, I can't say that we're totally satisfied because we still have jihadism prevalent. We have Palestinian Authority school books. We have money flowing in from Europe. We have jihadism that is backed by Turkey, by Qatar, by Iran, and it's all in the heartland of Israel, in the kind of what I call the heartland of the Holy Land in Judea and Samaria, what people out there call the West Bank, which is really the where the stories of the Jewish people, the foundations of our history, are found. And so the army's getting more prepared for it. Good. But we should not have jihadism in our borders or on our borders. And we're not doing enough to get rid of those elements. We're doing a lot to defend if such an incursion happens, but not enough to preemptively get rid of that stuff so it's not there. I mean, like, what would have been better? Would have been better to be ready for October 7th, or to make sure that it would have never happened in the first place? I think the latter is a better option. And so Jews in Judea and Samaria live with the reality that our next door neighbors have guns and ideology to destroy Israel, and we believe that that should be taken care of.
Well, so you mentioned, but some analysts warn that Gaza-style attacks could be attempted in the West Bank. How realistic is that scenario in your opinion? Could you foresee another October 7th on this front?
Absolutely. Why not? Why wouldn't I see it? What's the reason not to see it? They have the ideology, they have the guns. Put those things together, and they have, a sense of international backing as well. When Israel's delegitimized, when the rights of Jews living in Judea and Samaria is delegitimized, and then you have jihadist forces who look at that, they see that the West is coddling them, and they have the guns that got snuck in through drones, through Bedouin smuggling, and so they have the ideology, the arms, the backing. And the state of Israel has done a lot. And there was a huge operation right now in Bethlehem. They took illegal weapons, and they stopped a 50-person team that was going to shoot at Israeli civilians. But where there's smoke, there's fire. That's the ideology there. And they have the guns. They have the wherewithal. And we have not done enough. Israel has not done enough to destroy the elements that want to destroy us.
In parallel, the U.S., the EU, the UN have all raised concerns about settler-perpetrated violence. What are your thoughts on this?
Not just the EU and the UN, but also governors of Judea and Samaria all issued a statement yesterday saying, Yossi Dagan and Israel Gantz and others all came out with statements saying that we are 100% against illegal violence. We're against vigilante activity, and that should be stopped. And the mayors have called on the police to take this very seriously. And the fact is, the police is taking it seriously, and so is the army. And so we're against vigilante violence, period. However, and this is not to justify, it's just to understand that when you have a tense situation in Judea and Samaria, where Jews living in these parts feel that their neighbors are any minute going to attack them the way they did on October 7th, and that, as I said before, they have the wherewithal and the ideology, well, that causes tensions to flash. And that's, again, not condoning that at all, and not at all. We are against illegal violence. Right. But to understand where it comes from is important, because we have a much bigger enemy than that settler violence. The much bigger enemy is the jihad that's only waiting to strike us again as an October 7th, this time close to Jerusalem.
And on a different note, this Shabbat, around 40,000 people are expected in Hebron for the Chayei Sarah celebrations. What does this annual pilgrimage represent historically, spiritually, for Israelis?
Well, I'm very excited. In fact, I'm doing this interview, and then I got to get going, get to Hebron. That's where I work, and we read a Torah portion that talks about the purchase of the tomb of the patriarchs and matriarchs by Abraham 3,800 years ago. And this Torah portion, which is read by the Jewish people throughout the world, remembers that great event of the purchase and the place that would become the tomb of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah. And so we have 45,000 people coming to Hebron to hear that Torah portion of the purchase of this plot of land in the place. And it's really what I call Woodstock meets the Bible, right? Woodstock meets the Bible. It's this like amazing festival of identity, of history, of peoplehood, of belonging to a place, of indigeneity. And so it's an awesome, awesome celebration. And a lot of people come. There's going to be many Knesset members, ministers, people from abroad. The Hebron Fund brings a lot of people from abroad. So it's an amazing thing. And remember, this is Hebron, the heart of Judea and Samaria, the heart of the conflict. And yet people are coming unafraid to connect to the story of the Jewish people.
Sounds very special. Ishai Fleischer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
After 2 years of relentless war, Israel is facing another kind of battle, the one that begins when the fighting stops. From soldiers returning with injuries and trauma to freed hostages and civilians struggling with anxiety, the road to recovery is long and deeply personal. We're now joined by Guy Rosenberg, a trainer and mental warfare instructor who has spent years teaching elite IDF units how to stay focused under pressure. He's now applying those same tools to help Israelis rebuild their inner strength in the aftermath of war. Thank you for joining.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
Guy, you've spent years training soldiers to maintain focus under extreme pressure. How do those same techniques help when the battlefield is no longer physical, but psychological?
Yes, for some soldiers, actually the mind doesn't know when the battlefield is over. Okay, but some, they understand it. And they just need to get over it. They just need to practice certain techniques to clear the mind and sleeping hours and certain routine and breathing techniques to just to stay alive, just to be here. And when they dragging into the past all the time, into the future, and this is like disaster for the mind. So those techniques of meditation can really help those guys.
Now, for freed hostages who endured months, even years in captivity, what mental tools can support their rehabilitation now that they're free?
Again, so certain routine, very strict routine, and breathing exercise and certain techniques of concentration can really help those guys. And this is, of course, non-religion techniques. This is, of course, it came like from ancient monks and yogis, but still those techniques are actually kind of Jewish Mekubalim used to practice more or less the same. And they just need to have in a certain program, and you just to practice it and to keep the routine very strict. And this is the main idea here. So this is my recommendation.
Many wounded soldiers describe feeling lost after returning home, that the body heals faster than the mind. How can you retrain the mental focus to rebuild confidence and purpose?
Again,
would you say it's about meditation? I know that you've worked on meditation quite a lot.
Yeah. All my toolbox is about meditation. So what I usually do, I kind of tailor-made the techniques to the trainer and fix their daily routine and sleeping hours. And this is more or less like how the Buddhist monks practice in a monastery. Like only the routine can heal the mind. But you need to be so consistent. So most of the people, when they're suffering so much from anxiety and depression, they don't have the power and the motivation to keep very strict routine. And this is the main idea. And many hours of meditation and especially concentration meditation will do miracle to those guys.
Years of constant war have taken a toll on the entire country. We've spoken about soldiers, we've spoken about hostages who have been freed, but also ordinary Israelis. They too suffered a lot of stress and, living through war. So they too need to apply techniques of focus under pressure to handle the ongoing uncertainty, the burnout. Would you say the tools are the same?
Yeah, it's actually the same. The mind doesn't know if you were a hostage. So some people around us, even because of the war, sometimes without any concern to the war, they kind of a hostage as well. They're hostage for, like, the mind is captured because they having such a bad loop in the mind and they cannot have any release, so they're hostage as well. Like anxiety and depression, this is hostage. Right. You're hostage in your mind. And to release this in my limited toolbox again is meditation. Is only meditation. And when I say meditation, is to clear your mind, to clear your all these useless thoughts that actually you don't need and you not control it. So when you start to train yourself properly, so this is the time exactly when you are the boss, you are controlling the mind. And not because you need to be a free control. This is not about this. This is just to know how to train and know how to accomplish these techniques.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very interesting point that you make, Guy Rosenberg. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour, broadcasting live from Israel and the heart of the Middle East. We're here every hour on the hour with the latest breaking developments, in-depth reports, and exclusive insights into the stories shaping the region and the world. Stay with us throughout the day for our next edition of ILTV on the Hour. We'll be here as events continue to unfold. Scan the QR code for our apps. Until then, I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome to ILTV Security Brief. I'm Kalev Ben David. Each week, we focus on the latest developments and security and defense relating to Israel and the Middle East, impacting on this region and beyond. And we start with our top items of the past week. 11 years after he fell in battle in Gaza, Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body was finally returned by Hamas after it was recovered from a tunnel in Gaza. With the return of Golden and Lior Rudayev, the remains of 3 Israelis, Ron Givli, Dror, Meni Godard, and Thai worker Sundisak Rinthalak still remain in Gaza. Israel and the U.S. have reportedly agreed on a deal that will provide safe passage to some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels underneath IDF-held areas of Rafah, and then have them deported to another country. But no nation has yet agreed to take them in. IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir called for an external probe into the October 7th attack after a panel appointed by him concluded that the Army's internal investigations had proved inadequate. In the Knesset, Prime Minister Netanyahu argued against an official commission of inquiry amid protests in the gallery by family members who lost loved ones in the attack. In a wave of airstrikes, the IDF takes out Hezbollah military infrastructure in South Lebanon, including rocket launchers, and 3 Hezbollah operatives, among them Samir Ali Faki, who was engaged in weapons smuggling for the terror movement. The IDF has now eliminated 15 Hezbollah terrorists this month who were taking part in military activities in violation of the ceasefire agreement signed with the Lebanese government. The IDF's Arabic language spokesperson, Colonel Avichai Adraei, announced his retirement after 20 years. Adraei is Israel's most influential media figure in the Arab world and has won acclaim and threats for his effectiveness in presenting the IDF viewpoint throughout the Middle East. And now our big story. While the country rejoiced over the return of Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body from Gaza after 11 years, there were also troubling signs evident for Israel on multiple fronts. In Gaza, Hamas continues to retrench and rearm in those areas outside IDF control. Efforts to create a multinational Arab Muslim force to assume control of that territory are moving slow, with no nation yet accepting to take part. And the coordination between the U.S. and Israel over the post-war process in Gaza seems strained, evident in the wrangling over the fate of those Hamas terrorists still hiding out in IDF-held areas of Gaza. Meanwhile, on the northern front, Hezbollah is still trying to rebuild its military infrastructure in South Lebanon in violation of the ceasefire agreement with the Beirut government, necessitating continual IDF airstrikes across the border. And Hezbollah's patron, Iran, is moving ahead with rebuilding its nuclear facilities and defying international inspectors, increasing the odds of further conflict with Israel. Well, joining us to discuss these issues is Or Yisachar, Director of Research at the Israel Defense and Security Forum. Or, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Caleb.
Well, let's start with Gaza. The issue of these 200 terrorists, problem in and of itself, but emblematic of what seems to be almost a sort of make it up as you go along approach to issues that should have been resolved with the ceasefire agreement.
Right, and I think all parties understand that by the point where Hamas is part of the history books, we cannot actually end the war in Gaza. I think Israel and the administration speak in unison on this topic. We heard President Trump. Hamas can disarm peacefully, or we do it quickly and violently. We heard Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary Rubio saying point 13 of the ceasefire agreements clearly stipulates the demilitarization of Gaza, and Hamas has to lay down its weapons. So all parties understand that it's not just wishful thinking. This is pivotal and central to President Trump's attempts to instill peace in the Middle East. If Israel wants to normalize with Saudi Arabia, you better get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood main implant in the Middle East. And I think secretly and under the radar, these Arab countries understand that. The 200 terrorists stuck in a tunnel, it's quite a remote issue. It's very local. My only advice for those who are concerned is to just imagine what would happen if, God forbid, 200 IDF soldiers would be stuck in a tunnel at the mercy of Hamas terrorists. What they would do with them, I think we all know the answer.
Right, and certainly the U.S. and Israel on the same page in wanting to get rid of Hamas, but maybe timetables are slightly off. The U.S. really wants to see this regional peace move ahead. The Trump administration making steps. For example, talk about building this big base in Israel that would house international troops. Certainly an answer to the security issues in Gaza, but is that in some ways perhaps a troubling precedent for Israel moving forward? After all, administrations change, U.S. priorities and Israel's always don't align.
Well, I think we have had U.S. military personnel presence in Israel for a while now, but this really is next level. And my first concern would be to the American electorate before I'm worried about the Israeli point of view, as in I would very much look up into the average American asking themselves whether or not Americans should have boots on the ground in the Middle East. And I think the answer is no. What I think we're going forward with this is a military base, like leading from behind style, where they oversee
no
Israel's
boots
efforts.
and U.S. boots in Gaza. We should stress
no
here.
U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza, and that's nothing Israel ever asked for. The IDF can perfectly well handle with Hamas on its own in Gaza. And I think moving forward, we really do need to reimagine the available toolbox of solutions for Gaza. Within the Yellow Line, there have been talks on models or proofs of concept where certain cities will get sort of an autonomous state, such as Rafah or Bet Hanun or others, with the help of Abu Shabab or other militias. So by so doing, breaking the sort of the monopoly that Hamas has over the control of the Gaza Strip and avoiding a situation where the Palestinian Authority is part of the future of Gaza. So if we can actually make that proof of concept happen, the Emirates or city-states in Gaza, we can definitely implement the same model elsewhere in Judea and Samaria. You're right, timetable, time is running out, and Israel certainly has to use the next 3 years with Trump in the White House to, as fast as they can, reach the normalization with Saudi Arabia, security agreement with Syria. This is at the top of the agenda for Israel and for the administration.
Right. Now, let's actually, since you mentioned Syria, let's move to the northern front. But let's start with Lebanon, because as dicey as things or tricky as these things may seem in Gaza, it's situation more severe, certainly in Lebanon, with Hezbollah trying to retrench in South Lebanon. It seems like one can't even call it a ceasefire agreement at this point. The IDF having to strike almost daily at Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon.
Absolutely, and we can see the guiding hand behind all of these attempts, as U.S. sources claim that Iran wired as much as $1 billion to Hezbollah over the past few months. So we can clearly see that Hezbollah is making a great deal of efforts to rearm. And Israel cannot accept that. Under the ceasefire agreement, we saw how Israel demanded and accepted not only that Hezbollah does not fire rockets at Israel, but that Hezbollah does not arm itself in order to prepare for the next war. And Israel has been enforcing this ceasefire agreement ever since with much success. But we can see how Hezbollah's raison d'etre is to arm and sort of wage resistance against Israel. This is a huge problem for Israel and for Lebanon. The Lebanese government, Lebanese president have already declared and pledged in August to disarm Hezbollah. And it seems that they could have gone to this point because of Israel's military action, because Israel was bleeding in Lebanon and fought against Hezbollah. And now the Iranian efforts in Lebanon are putting all of this in jeopardy. We heard voices in Israel and in Lebanon, the topmost ranks in government, who expressed serious interest in normalizing relations between Israel and Lebanon, something that is really unheard of. And Hezbollah's attempts to arm itself, to rearm itself, and Iran's attempt to help it do so are putting sticks in the wheels. And I do hope that the international community holds Iran accountable and Lebanon itself accountable to prevent Hezbollah from acting this way in its territory.
But there are some analysts who believe that the Lebanese army simply doesn't have the capability, even if the government would have the will, and believe a wider conflict between Israel and Hamas, another round of full-out fighting, is almost inevitable. Do you share that view?
Right. So I think it's interesting because in Lebanon, we increasingly see how voices point the finger at Hezbollah rather than at Israel. We not only, of course, not Shiites, who are the natural base of Hezbollah, but Christians and Druze and Sunnis who have had it with Hezbollah and Iran's attempt to militarize Lebanon. And they claim, we don't want Lebanon to be involved in those fights. I spoke to these people who analyze Lebanon. We heard them on TV. We heard how even the foreign minister of Lebanon says that Hezbollah is the main obstacle to peace. We heard the Lebanese president say, for example, every time we make one step forward, Israel comes and attacks. But then again, it's kind of starting the story halfway through. If the Lebanese government prevents Hezbollah in Iran from militarizing Lebanon, Israel would not have to attack. So this wheel sort of repeats itself, and the ultimate response is for the Lebanese government and the Lebanese people to take responsibility over the territory. The U.S. offered help, France offered help, Israel offered help. But it seems like they have a common enemy now, which is Hezbollah and Iran. And now the main question is, how will the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government take control over their own territory, get rid of Iran's infiltration attempts within Lebanon, and march forward toward normalization with Israel? I think it will be a blessing for the region.
You mentioned Syria also has a common enemy with Iran, with Israel, and yet there are many in Israel who simply don't trust him, the former al-Qaeda figure, believe he's a leopard who can't change the spots. There was a meeting, almost a historic meeting, between President al-Shara and President Trump in the White House this week. But some of the things that President al-Shara said after the meeting or perhaps don't point in a positive direction, saying, no, the IDF has to withdraw from those areas of South Syria. It went in after the Assad regime fell. No demilitarization of South Syria. What are the real prospects of even security cooperation with Syria?
Well, I think security cooperation is a step in the right direction, but it's a step far removed from where we are today. We know that Syria wants to normalize with Israel, not because they like Jerusalem too much, but because they understand that Jerusalem is the gateway to Washington. And we understand that Israel is interested in that as well. Syria can be the first domino stone on the way to normalizing with Saudi Arabia, a lesser country, so to speak, on the way to the great custodian of the holy places of Islam. And we see how Shara is trying to portray a more moderate figure of itself, playing basketball with the head of CENTCOM, but commander of CENTCOM. And we do see how he is, I don't know if desperately, but he is trying to plead the Trump administration. He will sign that agreement if he gets what he wants, if he can present to his people an achievement. And Israel is happy to talk about various arrangements with the Golan Heights, but I think the demands are clear. Recognize the Israeli Golan Heights, work with us to secure the Syrian Golan Heights, and protect the Druze minority in Syria. If you can do all these three things, the dam is broken, and the dam will be broken on the way to full Israeli-Syrian cooperation. I wouldn't call it peace. I would call it a common sense security arrangement between these two countries, mutual recognition that's already a massive step.
Right. And briefly, Iran, you've mentioned it several times. Troubling signs there, too. Iran clearly trying to rebuild its nuclear facilities. Again, is it almost inevitable that Israel will have to resort to military force with or without the U.S. to deal with the Iranian nuclear threat?
Well, I think it's just proved the doctrine of peace through strength. I mean, both President Trump and Israel said over and over, if Iran does not stop nuclearizing, we will have to attack. And sure enough, at the end of those 60 days opportunity window that Trump gave them, and the 61st day, Israel attacked. And we see how the Iranians were shocked. They did not see this coming, but they are also determined to rebuild their nuclear facilities, and this cannot happen. So this also proved, on the other hand, the invalidity of the concept that we can sign a JCPOA, a nuclear agreement with Iran, like the West did in 2015. And there you have it. The agreement did not work. Last month in October, most of the clauses, what they call the sunset clauses, already expired.
Right.
The deal itself will expire in 5 years, and Iran is more determined than ever to acquire nuclear weapons. So the correct formula here is to, yes, strive to diplomacy with Iran, but let's not delude ourselves that the regime will sort of give up on its nuclear ambitions. Right. And so there has to be a muscle here that says, if you don't stop nuclearizing, we can strike again and again and again until such time that you stop threatening Israel with destruction. You cannot have nuclear weapons. And I think the big achievement from the June war, the 12-day war, is that the American electorate understands that the nuclear Iran is a threat on the United States, not just on Israel.
All right, clearly challenges for Israel remain on multiple fronts there. Or Yisachar, thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief. Israel's war against Hamas was fought on other fronts besides Gaza. This includes the media battlefield. Israel and its supporters pushed back against coverage that in many cases they saw as inaccurate, unfair, and biased. Among the worst offenders was the BBC, the UK public broadcaster with global reach. Now the BBC's two top executives have resigned after a recent internal report found fault with some BBC practices, including its coverage of the Gaza war, especially a documentary that focused on the son of a Hamas official. But while admitting some mistakes, the BBC chair is still pushing back on claims it has a bigger problem with its Israel coverage.
I don't think there's a systemic bias in anti-Israel. I mean, there are loads of arguments that suggest almost the opposite, you know. I think that we have issues, as I put underlying problems, and we've made changes in leadership to try and deal with that. But I think, you know, it's worth talking about the scale of the BBC and how much it does and how much excellent, impartial journalism it does.
And joining us for more is Flor Hassan Nahum. She's a special envoy for Israel's foreign ministry, someone who freely speaks out on behalf of Israel in these foreign media outlets, including the BBC. And Flor, you heard there the chair of the BBC, again, refuting the claim of a bigger problem, certainly when it comes to its coverage of Israel on the BBC. I mean, even with these resignations, which were prompted, let's be honest, more by their reporting of President Trump than their reporting on Israel, if changes is really coming to the BBC.
Well, I don't think so, because they seem pretty unrepentant. Tim Davie and Deborah Turnes, who left, are saying, no, we don't have a bias problem. They don't have a bias problem. They retract 2 Gaza stories every week. The problem is that they put out the Gaza story, which is a blood libel on Israel. They get the facts wrong. They won't call Hamas terrorists. They take the numbers of the Hamas so-called health ministry and use it as fact. And they regurgitate the talking points of the terrorists. And they seem completely unrepentant. And with everything that's happened, with all the stories they've had to retract, let's talk about some example. Al-Ai Hospital, where they said that Israel killed 500 people, it turned out to be a Hamas rocket, and then all of a sudden only 7 people were dead. The blood libels of starvation and famine, which now have been retracted by the UN, but who's looking at the retractions? And as you mentioned earlier, the famous documentary with the poor little boy in Gaza who turned out to be the son of the terrorist regime, Hamas's one of the ministers. They weren't even unrepentant about that. The only thing that has caused them to move is the fact that they did something to Trump. But I want to remind everybody that there's actually been a report, the Assassin report, that came out about a year ago that did a 9 million word check on the BBC and BBC Arabia, and they found it to be wholly biased. This is AI, and this is cold analysis that found them to be completely biased. What more proof do they need?
Right. And let's talk about the way this actually has impact in the real world, why we're talking it on Security Brief, because coverage of things like the Al-Ahi hospital bombing actually started protests and riots throughout Europe, governments pressuring on Israel, arms boycotts, dealing with Israel, something you deal with as an envoy. So we're talking about not just changing just public opinion, but actually impacting on policy when it comes to Israel's security.
Absolutely. And even worse, they don't make the connection at all that the anti-Semitism and the rise of anti-Semitism around the world, and the UK especially, is connected to their negative coveraging, peddling blood libels about the only Jewish state in the world. Never mind the fact that there's real massacres and there's real genocide and there's real starvation going on in places like Sudan. Gets very little coverage. Right. So it's the obsession and the bias.
Right. So what needs to be done? I mean, you certainly have been active in this field, but what could the Israeli government be doing more, the Jewish community be doing more to deal with these kind of issues, especially when it comes to a platform as influential as the BBC?
Well, it would help if we actually had some type of strategy in this country for fighting the communications war. We don't. We don't have one central command of how to fight the communications war. You have the Foreign Ministry and you have the Prime Minister's office that hasn't had a spokesperson for a long time, only recently, and also has a National Directorate for Public Diplomacy without a head for over a year and a half. You'd think in the middle of a war, that would be important. I think what has to change, Kalev, is first of all the understanding here in Israel that this is a real war and that the answer to that real war can't be a nice to have. It's a need to have. That kind of Israeli mentality that it doesn't matter what they say about us, it's what we do on the ground, that has to change because we're living in a different world. We are in a hybrid war. The war is hybrid. It's both military and it's also narrative and it's also communication. And Israel is not even in the arena of the communications war.
Right. I will note one thing. We should note the announcement of the retirement of Colonel Avichai Adrai from the IDF, someone who's been in this position for 20 years, who speaks Arabic, who's been I can think of actually no other figure in the Israeli government or military that had maintained a position of that kind of experience, that continuity, and was able to be as effective as he has been. So there is an example of what can be done when the right person is out there in the right place.
But that's the Army spokesperson unit.
Right.
The Army spokesperson unit have actually done a decent job. But if you're not in coordination with the Prime Minister's office because you don't have a head of a public diplomacy directorate and you're not all in the same message and there's no central command, you can have fantastic people speaking in different forums, but if there's no real strategy or communications fighting this war, it's like all of us being soldiers shooting in a different direction. So whilst people like that have been amazing, and I will say something else, you know, Israel's image, if we are to be accused of being this aggressive military force, do we really need a man in a uniform being the spokesperson for the country? Just these things have to be thought about, how things look and how things and how the messaging is put out and by who and in what structure. We have none of it. We are all soldiers in a war without a military command, without a command structure. And that is something that the government has to wake up and change because the real Third World War has already started, and it is in the media.
Well, certainly it is, and certainly the impact that the media's had on governments and public opinions. You could see no greater illustration than, for example, Israel's war against Hamas.
Absolutely. And the fact that Hamas has the sympathy of the world somehow, and not Israel, who was attacked, that is as much as an indication of the hatred of Israel, but it's also as much as an indication of the lack of strategy in Israel.
All right, Flor Hassan Nahum, thank you for joining us on Security Brief. And now a final word. The U.S. this week marked Veterans Day on November 11th, the national holiday honoring those who have served in the armed forces. Israel has no equivalent to this holiday, the closest being Yom HaZikaron, which, like the American Memorial Day, is focused on those who have fallen in service. Perhaps Israel felt it had no need for a specific day to honor veterans when the percentage of those who served in the IDF were once a clear majority of the population that was eligible to do so. But that number has dropped significantly in recent years to a minority figure, even as the burden of reserve duty to those who do serve has dramatically increased over the past 2 years. The government is now in the process of trying to help out those younger veterans with various benefits, most notably a bill moving through the Knesset that would provide special tax credits to IDF reservists. But the measure, first introduced this summer, has become stalled owing to a dispute between Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich and the Likud over the terms of the tax credits and who qualifies for them, with both sides accusing the other of grandstanding for public approval. It's well past time for this infighting to stop and this bill to immediately become law, as reservists suffer under the financial burden of missing so many days of work and study since the start of the Gaza war. But of course, it is the height of hypocrisy for Smotrich and the rest of the government to claim sympathy for reservists, while at the same time they advance a new version of the Haredi enlistment bill that in actuality would strip away most of the real incentives to reduce the deferments given to the ultra-Orthodox sector. The IDF is suffering a real manpower crisis and needs to boost enlistment, and no amount of tax credits for reservists will compensate for all the days they've had to spend away from home, work, and family to make up for that shortfall. Now, the U.S. treatment of its veterans is certainly not without faults, but on America's Veterans Day, I do think of my late father, David Mandel, who after his service during World War II greatly benefited by the GI Bill of Rights that helped pay for his education, for the mortgage on his first home, and even the cost of my own education. Perhaps Israel doesn't need a Veterans Day or even a GI Bill of Rights, but it does need the government to respect the sacrifices of those who both serve and served, in giving them the benefits they deserve and penalizing those who fail to heed the call to duty. Thank you for joining us on ILTV Security Brief.
And in other news, Americans for Ben-Gurion University has launched the David Ben-Gurion Speaks, an AI-powered video series that brings Israel's founding prime minister to life. Let's take a look.
I am David Ben-Gurion, and 50 years after my death, my namesake, Ben-Gurion University, has bloomed into an oasis of innovation in the Negev desert. 20,000 students on campuses in Be'er Sheva, Sdei Boker, and Eilat study desert and water resource, sustainable drylands, alternative energy, global health, medical breakthroughs, robotics, and fields unknown in my time: nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. My friends, it is not enough to be up to date. You have to be up to tomorrow. Israel's future was rising from the Negev, just as I had envisioned. And so they came to destroy it.
And today we once again have the pleasure of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she brings us the latest highlights and inspiring updates from the fellowship's ongoing work.
Shalom from here in Israel. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are two fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number one, the fellowship learned that in the city of Tiberias, there were many people who were suffering from food insecurity. After 2 years of war, there were people suffering. They couldn't afford food, and they couldn't find basic food items. And so the fellowship opened up a soup kitchen. And so now, in the city of Tiberias, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is distributing over 150 food boxes every single day to people in need. Number two, I want you to meet Valentina. She's 85 years old, and she's just one of so many people who get helped by the fellowship. She's been living alone for over 2 years since her husband died. She has no one to visit her, no one to help her, and we learned recently she doesn't have enough to buy both her medications, to pay her rent, and to buy food. And every single month, a volunteer delivers to Valentina a food box with everything that she needs. This is saving lives physically and spiritually. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 2 fellowship projects that you now know about. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening here in the Holy Land at the fellowship. Shalom.
Turn up the volume. I am Chaim Bivers, Mayor of Modi'in and Chairman of the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. It's time to join us in Modi'in, City of the Future. We are waiting to welcome you to our young, modern, innovative city with great schools and of course all the benefits. Hope you will make Aliyah soon and join our Olim community who are so happy to call Modi'in their home. Now is the time to make Aliyah. See you soon.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments across Israel and the region. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas announced they would be transferring an additional hostage body to Israel tonight. The IDF says in Gaza, its forces eliminated 4 terrorists along the Yellow Line. In Rafah, troops spotted armed operatives emerging from underground tunnels. 3 were killed with no injuries to Israeli forces. In Han Yunis, another terrorist who crossed into Israeli-controlled territory was neutralized. These gunmen are among roughly 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding in what the army calls the terror pocket in Rafah. Additional strikes targeted houses and infrastructure used for militant activity as Israel and the U.S. continue discussions on deporting those still in the tunnels. Meanwhile, in the north, the IDF struck multiple Hezbollah terror sites embedded near Lebanese civilians, another example, Israel says, of Hezbollah's use of human shields. Troops also hit an additional terror position as the group attempts to rebuild its capabilities. The IDF says it will continue acting to remove threats on both fronts and defend Israeli communities. Former hostages Aviva and Keith Siegel testified before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, recounting their harrowing experiences in Gaza. Aviva Siegel, held for 51 days, told of young female hostages who were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. She described the trauma these girls faced, including being threatened with death if they spoke out. Aviva's testimony highlighted the brutal conditions and crimes committed against hostages, bringing international attention to Hamas's treatment of captives in Gaza. The Siegel's statements come as part of global efforts to document abuses and seek accountability for the terror attacks of October 7th. Let's take a listen.
I'm a witness of one of the girls that was with us, that the Hamas terrorist took her into the bathroom, told her to get undressed, came into the shower with her and forced her to do oral sex on her. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was forced to take a shower. She's 16 years old. She's never ever showed anybody her body. The Hamas terrorist just stood there and stared at her and smiled.
One of the terrorists held a pistol to her head and told her that if she does not confess, he will kill her. I don't know what my state of mind was during this time. In retrospect, I feel like the terrorists had complete control over me. They told me what to do and I did it. The memories of the situation that I was in haunt me to this day.
The IDF is carrying out a major two-division exercise in Judea and Samaria, an unprecedented drill aimed at testing operational readiness on Israel's eastern front. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise, which includes the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade, alongside Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. He held a situational briefing with field commanders and emphasized that October 7th changed Israel's security doctrine. Zamir said the new Eastern Division was created as a direct lesson from the war, stressing that the IDF must now neutralize threats before they reach Israel's doorstep, reinforcing forces wherever necessary to prevent the next attack. He also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians after video emerged showing vehicles set on fire near Beit Lid. The U.S. has expressed concern over settler-Palestinian clashes in the West Bank. And on a happy note, Israel's biggest pop star, Noah Kirel, married soccer star Daniel Peretz in a high-profile sunset ceremony in Jaffa. The chuppah was led by Chief Rabbi David Lau. The intimate event hosted 150 family members and close friends, including celebrity musicians and athletes. The celebrations continued Wednesday with a larger party for family and friends, promising dancing and festivities. Kirel and Peretz began dating in the summer of 2023, got engaged in September 2024, and have been celebrating with traditional pre-wedding events including mikveh immersion, challah bake, and a henna party. The wedding has become one of Israel's most high-profile celebrity events, drawing attention locally and internationally. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East.
Israel's only English news channel, bringing you the headlines that matter every hour, straight from the center of where it's all unfolding.
Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Emily Schrader, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel faces increasing ceasefire violations in Lebanon and Gaza, threatening the fragile calm. Fate of terrorists in IDF-controlled Gaza still not resolved as U.S. pressure increases and Hamas gains power. Syrian President al-Shara visits Washington as Trump urges agreement with Israel. The Gaza ceasefire plan is inching forward, but only slightly, as the fate of the terrorists on the IDF-held side of Gaza remains unresolved, and Hamas continues to claim it's searching for 4 slain hostages that are still being held in Gaza. Breaking all this down is ILTV's Kalev Ben-David with more.
The return this week of Lieutenant Hadar Golden's body from Gaza after 11 years proved another benefit resulting from the ceasefire that ended Israel's 2-year war with Hamas. But it came amid increasing signs of strain on the agreement that raised serious concerns over how it can move forward. Hamas has still failed to return the remains of 4 more hostages, 3 Israelis and 1 Thai worker, in violation of the terms of the ceasefire. Israel has said that until all the hostages are returned, it won't resolve another outstanding issue: the fate of some 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding out in tunnels beneath Rafah in IDF-held territory. Prime Minister Netanyahu met with President Trump's advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner on Monday and reportedly worked out a deal that would see the terrorists be given safe passage to a third country. But no nation has stepped forward willing to take them in. No country has also publicly agreed to take part in the Arab-Muslim International Stabilization Force that is supposed to secure a post-Hamas Gaza. In the meantime, U.S. commanders at the Civilian Military Command Center in Kiryat Gat are said to be coordinating with Palestinian militia groups in Gaza opposed to Hamas, although the State Department denied reports that Kushner met personally with one of their leaders, Yasser Abu Shabab. The Gaza ceasefire plan increasingly looks like a complex jigsaw puzzle with some key pieces missing. And with that picture incomplete, Hamas is stepping into the vacuum, retrenching, rearming, and still posing a threat to Israel and the IDF.
Israeli Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer has announced his resignation after serving 3 years in office. Dermer was Prime Minister Netanyahu's closest aide, making his departure from the role impactful for the Prime Minister's political ambitions. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer has officially stepped down from his role as Prime Minister Netanyahu's top aide, a role he served in for over 3 years. In his resignation letter personally addressed to the Israeli Prime Minister, Dermer said that the current government will be remembered for two things. The first, the October 7th massacre, and the second, the subsequent management of the Seventh Front War, which lasted for 2 years. Dermer added, quote, "In our darkest hour, the people of Israel had worthy leaders." Dermer praised Netanyahu's, quote, "experience and strong leadership," saying he stood up to pressure at home and abroad, adding, quote, "When the truth comes out and the facts are known, I am confident that appreciation for your leadership will be even greater." Dermer served as one of Netanyahu's closest advisors and is the former ambassador to the United States. Upon resignation, Dermer said he had fulfilled his mission to confront Iran's nuclear threat, strengthen Israel's alliances, and help bring hostages home. He praised the IDF's resolve and said he remains confident in Israel's future, saying, quote, "The light of our eternal people will continue to burn bright for generations to come." While stepping down from the government, Dermer will operate as a special envoy for Netanyahu and remain involved on certain issues, such as efforts to expand the Abraham Accords, according to the Times of Israel.
Well, Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer is leaving the government, and at the same time, the IDF is saying goodbye to one of its most recognizable voices. Colonel Avichai Adrei, the IDF's Arabic language spokesperson, is retiring after nearly 2 decades in the role. Adrei built a massive following across the Arab world using social media to counter propaganda and promote understanding, and he became a household name in much of the Arab world for his work, even earning the nickname Mr. Evacuate Now for his warnings to civilians to clear active war zones. His retirement marks the end of an era in Israel's Arabic language outreach, while Dermer's exit signals a shift in Israel's strategic affairs leadership. Both men leave behind a legacy of professionalism and dedication to Israel's security. Adrei often spoke directly to audiences in Lebanon, Syria, and Gaza in perfect Arabic, breaking through hostile media barriers. His unique style made him one of the most influential Israeli figures in Arab digital spaces. Well, with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara's historic visit to Washington, the likelihood of a Syrian-Israeli agreement seems high. Let's take a look at the latest developments.
Israel is facing a potential game changer on its northern border with Syria. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara is currently in Washington for historic talks at the White House, where he confirmed that Damascus is engaged in direct negotiations with Israel and says the two sides have gone a good distance toward an agreement. Al-Shara is demanding that Israel withdraw to the positions held on December 8th before any final deal can be sealed, including withdrawal from territory south of the Golan Heights buffer zone. Meanwhile, President Trump, who met with al-Shara in Washington, has publicly backed Syria's position, saying he will do everything he can to make Syria successful, and adding that he's working with Israel on getting along with Syria, and that it is working, quote, amazingly. Trump also said that the United States now sees Syria as a potential partner, and that American support for the talks means Israel must be ready for a shift in the status quo. From Israel's perspective, these developments raise serious questions about security. Will Israel agree to withdraw to pre-December positions while still maintaining the buffer zone it considers critical for defense? Any agreement could redraw the northern border for decades to come. The United States under Trump is now acting as the main broker between Israel and Syria, and with al-Shara in Washington and American backing tipping the balance, Israel is being pushed into negotiations on terms it may find unpalatable. This is a moment that could redefine Israel's northern frontier and determine whether the region moves forward towards stability or new conflict.
Well, as questions loom over Israel's future with Syria, the other military fronts are also heating up in Lebanon, Gaza, and possibly Iran. Joining us now to discuss the latest developments is Dr. Fadi Ismail, a former senior staff in U.S. Congress and a research fellow at Reichman University. Fadi, thank you so much for joining us. Just to start, what is your prediction when it comes to Syria? Will we see some kind of agreement? And is it even in Israel's interest in terms of security? What guarantees would Israel need to move forward?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Look, it's actually, I'm not, there's several parts to this point. First of all, Syria needs to be reestablished as a state. It has to happen. That is quite a big chunk of geography that hasn't seen any stability for almost 15 years now. And it is in everybody's best interests on a security level, but also very importantly on an international economic level to have some level of peace and security there. So every effort that the U.S. administration is making and anybody else to get there is understandable, including the current charm offensive that the President Trump is practicing on the guy that everybody calls a shadow, although it's not his real name, who is now the temporary president of Syria. Now, that's on one side. The second side is, I don't trust these people. I'll be honest with you. I just don't trust them. I have never seen any agreement that they have adhered to in their lives, historically, centuries. You can do stuff with them if you understand that for sure, wherever they can, they'll surprise you.
Well, we'll have to watch closely what happens in terms of President Trump. Of course, there's a lot of concerns swirling now about the situation, obviously, with the Druze, with the Christians in Syria. I don't see a way there can be an agreement without taking those issues into account. But before we do have to wrap up, I just want to ask you, because there's been so many reports in recent weeks about Hezbollah's rearming in Lebanon. I mean, the Islamic Republic in the last year, we saw they poured approximately $1 billion back into this terror group. Of course, all in violation of the existing ceasefire. I mean, will Israel be forced to expand these military operations in Lebanon, and what are the consequences of such a move?
Look, Emily, stay with me for a minute. This is it's a very good question on even more levels than the audience may think. The Syrian government, who is an enemy to Iran and Hezbollah, we have reports that recently they have relaxed the control over the border with Lebanon, enabling some level or increased level of weaponry to move towards Hezbollah. Why would you do that? So that they show how critical they are in the fight against Hezbollah. So now we talk about Hezbollah, and the Syrian government is already using, I'm talking about the current Syrian government, using our concern with them to make us get closer to Syria as much as possible. I mean, from the American standpoint. As of course, Iran is trying to rebuild itself. Of course, Hezbollah, that's obvious, like Hamas is doing. They're not going to just give up everything that they've built. They still have abilities. They still have weapons. When I say I mean Hezbollah. Basically, my message is people don't go to sleep. We're still in the middle, if not in the beginning. So that's what I have to say.
All right. Well, we do have to wrap up. I want to thank you for shedding some light on the situation in Syria. Of course, we'll continue to update our viewers about the recent events. Thank you so much, Dr. Fadi Ismail.
Thank you for having me.
Turn up the volume. Hi, this is Moshe Leon, Mayor of Jerusalem. If you are looking for a new place to call home, Jerusalem, the beating heart of Israel, a city of history, culture, and innovation, is a city for you. My team and I are waiting for you with many special benefits for new residents. Now is the time. Make Aliyah.
Israel is strong and growing. Now more than ever is the time to make Aliyah.
Now, who are the remaining hostages still in the Gaza Strip? As Israel continues its efforts to bring them home, freed hostage Matan Zangaukar does his first interview after over 2 years in captivity. Our correspondent India Naftali has more. India, what can you tell us about the remaining hostages?
Emily, we know that there are still 4 fallen hostages in the Gaza Strip, and all 4 of them were killed during the Hamas massacre on October 7th. Now, Hamas claims that they are not able to find the bodies due to what they call chaotic circumstances in the Gaza Strip. However, if we can remember, Hamas did initially agree to the return of all the hostages, dead or alive, within 72 hours of the ceasefire, which, as we know, they have not held up that side of the bargain. The first of the fallen hostages whose body remains in Gaza is Dror Or, a chef and cheesemaker. At 48 years old, he was murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th in Kibbutz Be'eri, and his body was taken into Gaza. His wife was also murdered on that day. Their children, Noam and Alma, were kidnapped alive into Gaza, but were later freed during the November 2023 ceasefire. The teenagers were devastated to learn upon their return that both of their parents had been murdered. There is also Meni Goddard, 73 years old, who was murdered together with his wife when Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists invaded their home in Kibbutz Be'eri. He was a former professional soccer player and fought in the Yom Kippur War. Ron Gavili was a 24-year-old police officer serving in the Yassam Patrol Unit, which is a special patrol unit in Israel's police force. He fell in battle while defending the country. His body was abducted into Gaza. And finally, there is 43-year-old Sudasak Rintalak. He is the only non-Israeli among the remaining hostages. He was a Thai agricultural worker who was working on Kibbutz Be'eri when he was brutally murdered by terrorists. And now, released hostage Matan Zangaukar is sharing his story. In a new interview, he described the mind games his Hamas captors played, feeding him false reports that they had destroyed Israeli tanks or killed soldiers. While in captivity, Zangaukar learned about his mother's tireless campaign to bring him home. It was a discovery that, he says, kept him strong through 2 years of captivity. When all 4 of the remaining fallen hostages return home, it would be the first time in over a decade that no hostages, living or dead, would be in Gaza. Now, it's a moment this country has long awaited, but it's also a non-negotiable if we want to see the next stage of the ceasefire plan come to fruition. Emily, back to you.
All right, India, thanks for that update. Certainly important to highlight the plight of those remaining hostage bodies that have not been returned. And now the biggest threat to Israel throughout this conflict has been, of course, the Islamic regime in Iran. And sadly, it remains so today as well. In recent weeks, we saw the Islamic Republic attempt to assassinate the Israeli ambassador to Mexico. Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has confirmed this is far from the only attempt by the regime. At the same time, this regime is facing crushing sanctions and an economic crisis domestically, even whilst they send money to terror proxies. Now, here to speak with us about the situation in Iran is Ramin Parham, an author and political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to start with the domestic issue going on in Iran. I mean, the regime is under intense sanctions. There's a massive drought, largely due to government mismanagement. What are people feeling? And is this regime really under a high level of domestic pressure inside Iran?
Yes, there is a high level of domestic pressure inside Iran for many reasons. The water issue is of much concern. It's a very dangerous situation. We have the metropolitan area of Tehran, the capital city of Tehran, with something like 13 to 15 million people who are going to be without water, basically, within the next couple of weeks. And there's no solution in sight for that grave crisis, And that in the background of, you have to put that in the background of a dire economic situation with rampant inflation, unemployment, particularly for the young and educated ones, massive corruption, and in general, the feeling that the country doesn't have a functioning government, the country doesn't have a functioning executive branch, which makes the situation very difficult. And several top figures, academics, mostly, to my knowledge, social democrat-leaning intellectuals and academics who have been arrested, among others. So the situation is bad.
Well,
the least you could say.
As you know, despite these dire economic challenges, the regime has still spent over $1 billion in the past year, sending it to Hezbollah in Lebanon to rebuild. How is this regime still financing terror when they can't even provide water for the people of Iran?
I don't have any specifics about the amount of money that they have been spending over the past 12 months. It is common knowledge that they do have proxies, which they call the resistance movement throughout the region. That is a public knowledge. It is also public knowledge that so-called resistance, the proxies from Iraq all the way to Lebanon, have cost the Iranian people a significant amount of money over the past several decades. That's public knowledge. But what has happened over the past 12 months, I don't have any specifics. The thing is that there are indications that we are heading toward the second round of military confrontation between Iran and Israel. And there are also indications that there could be strikes against Shia militias in Iraq, in Lebanon, and elsewhere. So there is some sort of a biological reaction, I would say, to that thing. That is, they are ramping up their military strength, probably. They are spending budgets and money on rebuilding the ballistic capacity of the country with regards to the likelihood of another round of military confrontation, which is understandable because there is a military threat.
All right, well, we do have to end. We are unfortunately out of time, but I want to thank you for joining the broadcast today. Thank you, Ramin Parham.
Thank you.
And in other news, Americans for Ben-Gurion University has launched David Ben-Gurion Speaks, an AI-powered video series that brings Israel's founding prime minister to life. Let's take a look.
On October 7, 2023, Ben-Gurion University students, faculty, and alumni were among those murdered, taken hostage, and later called to defend our nation. Then, in June 2025, ballistic missiles destroyed buildings and decades of research. But Ben-Gurion University carries not only my name, David Ben-Gurion, it carries my pioneering spirit and determination. It is rebuilding and expanding campuses while caring for the community affected by the war. My friends, in Israel, to be a realist, you have to believe in miracles. This is Ben-Gurion University, a testament to resilience and the way forward for our people, our country, and the world.
The Genesis Prize Foundation announced last night that the 2026 Genesis Prize laureate is Israeli actress Gal Gadot for her continuous advocacy and actions in support of Israel. More from ILTV's Devil Klein.
Gal Gadot is the 2026 Genesis Prize laureate. Announced Tuesday night in the Genesis ceremony, Israeli actress Gal Gadot was commended for her advocacy and support of Israel and for the victims of October 7th. Gadot joins former Genesis Prize winners, including the likes of Argentinian President Javier Milei, Steven Spielberg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Robert Kraft, Yitzhak Perlman, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, and many more in this honorable award. Gadot said she intends to donate the $1 million prize to proceeds to help Israelis heal, rebuild, and recover after October 7th. Gadot received immense backlash from fans internationally after posting on her social media calls to return the hostages from Hamas captivity back in 2023. But Gadot's efforts didn't stop with social media. The Israeli actress organized private screenings of raw footage from the October 7th attacks for world leaders, influencers, and top Hollywood executives, spreading both the plight of the hostages and the Israelis impacted by the Hamas massacre. For her efforts, the Genesis Prize Foundation called the actress, quote, a hero on screen and an even greater hero in real life. Congratulations.
And in a disturbing development, Israeli experts are alarming the public to the dangerously low levels of water in the Sea of Galilee, reaching the lowest point ever in over a decade. According to experts, the water level dropped by more than 2.5 meters a year on average over the past few years alone, which is far faster than in previous droughts, despite recent efforts to pump desalinated water into the lake. This is what the shores of the Kinneret, located in Israel's Galilee, looks like right now. On Tuesday, the water levels reached lower than 34.5 meters below the red line, a threshold that marks a critical shortage. And just as a reminder, this is Israel's only natural wet water resource. And despite efforts to pump desalinated water from the Mediterranean Sea into the Sea of Galilee, experts warned that the levels continue to drop and Israel could be in a load of trouble. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Cloudy skies are expected around most of the country tonight, with temperatures reaching lows of 17 degrees Celsius or 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we'll see cloudy skies and partly rainy showers alongside steady temperatures, seeing highs of 25 degrees Celsius or 78 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, our new channel, and you can also catch us on Screen IL with 24/7 live coverage. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you for watching.
On this week's ILTV Insider, we're tackling a deeply troubling trend, the growing normalization of the phrase, the Gaza genocide. Once an accusation, it's now being used as an accepted fact by academics, activists, and even journalists. What happens when language this charged becomes mainstream? How does it impact Israel's image, the Jewish people, and the global fight against anti-Semitism? Joining me to break it down are former member of Knesset Mossi Raz and former AP Regional Chief Dan Perry. Together, we'll explore what's really behind this narrative, the media's role in shaping it, and how Israel can reclaim the truth before it's too late. So I want to jump right in and get started with you, Zan. This idea that Israel committed genocide. And I say that in quote marks because we don't know. Did Israel commit genocide? You'll have to answer that for me. But it's become very normalized. Academia, political activists, obviously, but even in the media. Did Israel commit genocide, and how did this happen?
Well, it is a complex question that, in the end, reduces a global historic cataclysm on all sides, that is the Gaza war, into a question of semantics. But semantics can be important. So this word genocide, it means something to a lot of people. And it is defined by the 1948 UN Genocide Convention. And that Genocide Convention speaks very clearly of the intent to destroy people in whole or in part. The interpretation of that could go a lot of different ways, but I do not think it applies to a situation where perhaps a lot of people died in the context of an intent to achieve other ends. And Israel's purpose in the war in Gaza was to destroy Hamas and to remove them as a governing and military entity in Gaza, and to recover the hostages, that all those who are dead and all those who are alive. You see very clearly that the minute those goals are achieved, Israel's willing to end the war. Therefore, it simply is not a genocide, but there has been a monumental global campaign to attach this word to Israel's actions, and that campaign has leveraged the fact that in the public at large around the world, there is great confusion about what I just said, and there's a general sense that a large-scale death is a genocide. Whereas, in fact, under the Genocide Convention, you can have a genocide where no one died, but there was an intent. So there's
so
a
wouldn't
total
you say
disconnect.
Hamas committed a genocide then, but Israel did not?
In my view, the October 7th action by Hamas was absolutely genocidal. Their goal was to kill as many Jews as they can. The Israeli action that killed many more Palestinians than Jews that were killed on October 7th was not genocidal because its goal was something else. There was a dual goal that did not include kill as many Palestinians as possible. Now, I'm not naive. There were people in Israel that actually would share that goal, but they were not running the government. God knows I am no fan of the Netanyahu government, but that was not the goal of the government. And therefore, I would argue, A, it's not a genocide, but B, in the public comprehension of that word, it might be seen as such if it's repeated enough times. Now, notice, no one speaks of the Ukrainian genocide. It is a very, very rare word to use in history. And if it turns out that it ends up being routinely and casually applied to what happened in Gaza, because of the rarity of it, it has value. Scarcity has value. It will be very damaging for Israel.
So, Moshe, let me ask you, piggybacking on that, if Israel did not commit a genocide, then how did it become that the word is being applied to our actions? And what kind of impact is this going to have on the Jewish state? Why is there a double standard when it comes to Israel?
I'm not sure that there is double standard. I'm not sure about this term of genocide. This is something that is very juridically, and I don't want to I don't have enough knowledge in order to know. Probably you are right that this is not genocide. By the way, I'm not sure that what Hamas has done with all the crimes is genocide, but it's not my business to talk about that. It's crimes. The problem is, I think, that yes, there was intent even of some government, some ministers in the government, not of the government, not of the army, but there was intent, and even they were stupid enough to say that. There were, unfortunately, many soldiers took photos of themselves committing war crimes. Not only committing crimes, but taking photos of themselves. And yes, of course, I guess it's part of the fact that so many civilians were killed. It's something that we did not see here, never. Of course, it was part of it is the fact that in percentage, yes, if you talk about percentage of the population in Gaza, it's probably about more or less 4%, which is a lot. It's probably part of that is the fact that I think in most of the world, Israel is the aggressor in the fact, not of course Hamas committed the crimes in October 7, but because of the occupation. So it's part of all this picture. The fact that the government in Israel did not say, okay, we understand that there were crimes. We understand that innocent people, 2,000 babies who were born after October 7. We understand that innocent people were killed. We want to investigate. We want to make an end to that. The fact that the government is not doing that is helping those who say this was genocide.
But then what happens to the Jews that are living abroad? You know, Jews in the diaspora certainly are not making government decisions in Israel, may or may not support the policies of the state of Israel. And yet, what seems to happen is as Israel commits, quote-unquote, genocide in Gaza, this becomes mainstream, it's fueling these anti-Semitic tropes and putting the Jewish community at risk. Dan, can you talk about that?
There's no doubt that is so. I'm saying that the word genocide is very rarely applied in history. The Armenian genocide, the Turks are still denying it. The genocide of Jews, the Holocaust, the Germans are still paying for it. The Rwanda genocide, which is pretty much the only other one that's been accepted, is still a major thing, and movies are being made about it, and it still discredits the government of Rwanda, or part of it. It's a very dangerous label, and it will make it impossible for whoever is accused of such an action to navigate the world in a placid and normal fashion for many years and probably many decades, and that will apply also to their supporters. So if the Jews support Israel, then the world will see them as complicit. Imagine supporting the Nazis in 1956. You're not going to have a good time of it, okay? And therefore, it will absolutely be a booster rocket for anyone who has bad faith anti-Semitic intentions that have nothing to do with what Israel actually did or didn't do. Therefore, for the Jews in the world, unless they're prepared to disavow Israel because it will become a litmus test at all times for them, they need to get on board with the program of making sure that the events of the Gaza war are not labeled a genocide. Mossi says it's not our business, it's juridical, it's political. If it ends up being labeled a genocide, if it moves from accusations that Gaza was a genocide and that Israel should be charged with genocide to a routine and casual reference to the Gaza genocide, that will be devastating. But I have to note, I agree with Mossi. What happened in Gaza was not necessarily okay. It is conceivable that there were war crimes in Gaza. Of course, you could also argue that every war has war crimes. It could be, it may be that there are major war crimes.
And you could also argue that Hamas was using their people as human shields and that Hamas committed
absolutely.
So many issues that it almost was impossible to
Hamas
fight.
is not acceptable anywhere.
Yeah.
Hamas is a terror organization.
Israel seeks to be acceptable. Look, let me say this. 20 years ago, I was the AP bureau chief in Israel and the chairman of the Foreign Press Association in Israel, Palestine. Okay, I remember during the Second Intifada, you had, especially when it became kind of a war in the West Bank, you had a lot of actions that cost civilian lives or could have cost civilian lives. We had IDF spokesman people in our office, coming physically to our office, explaining everything they did, why they did it, why they minimized civilian casualties, whenever they didn't take an action. I remember a near assassination effort of Abdelaziz Rantisi, but they stopped because they found out his family was around, didn't want to kill 6 innocent people. And they made a point of telling us. That was Israel knowing that it's under a magnifying lens. Today,
So what changed?
what changed is that you have this government in Israel that knows it stands accused of prolonging the war for political reasons, that knows that it stands accused in the media of bombing some cafe in Gaza where 20 people died, and it doesn't come out and say, this is untrue, or this is true and was a mistake, or here's why we did it anyway. Israel hasn't told its story. Now, I, like Mossi, suspect very strongly that part of the story is untellable.
So let me turn to Mossi for a minute because I want to actually ask
They haven't
you.
even tried.
So then let me ask you this. We're about to open up Gaza within the next few weeks. There was a Supreme Court ruling. Reporters are going to re-enter, foreign press, re-enter Gaza very soon. We heard, Dan, what happened 20 years ago when the reporters went in. Today, the reporters are going to go into Gaza, and they are going to see 80% of Gaza flattened. What narrative should Israel prepare? What should Israel be doing right now? I mean, you're a politician. At least how could you think Israel should spin it to ensure that this genocide narrative does not continue or does not be perpetuated?
First, I have to say that the fact that the international media will go into Gaza will not change anything because in the world they saw everything. They know that.
But it's different to see it with your own eyes.
Yes, I think, but there's so many pictures and so many. We have social media, and people saw that. I think that the real reason why it was not open until now is that the government doesn't want the Israelis to know what happened in Gaza. Not that I'm sure that they care about that, but the Israelis don't know what happened in Gaza.
Don't they also watch the same social media?
Yeah, but of course. But who you see in the social media? Your friend, the one who think like you. Not you don't see the films from Gaza. You see the films from Nova.
I have to stand
Still,
up for
2 years later.
a little bit. Yes, we've seen social media. And yes, we've had reporting from inside Gaza, all by Palestinians, some working for foreign media, who you could reasonably claim are A, involved, and B, afraid of the Hamas. So there has been a degree of skepticism attached to the reporting of Gaza. Yeah, we've seen pictures of destruction.
Yeah, okay,
but you know what? We haven't seen a zoom out to really make an assessment. When professional journalists who are not involved and not afraid of Hamas go in, the reporting on what happened will have a lot more credibility. And Mayan is right. It will look terrible. So what needs to happen is Israel needs to figure out real fast why it did what it did, what is defensible, and then defend it. And they need to attack the genocide charge head on by really arguing persuasively. And it cannot be just Netanyahu, who at this point convinces no one. There has to be a concerted national effort by the government and the military to explain what they did, to apologize for what they did wrong, to maybe take a hit on things that are indefensible, and to present a picture of a reasonable country.
Do you envision?
It is not enough. It is not enough. First, what happened when UK was charged of war crimes? They said, okay, we investigate, we will charge people.
Yeah, sure.
So the international court say, okay, we have somebody to trust. Now here, you have 70,000 people who were killed. Most of them, Prime Minister says, are innocent.
And no one's been convicted of anything.
So how come? No investigation, nothing. Only one investigation, they attack the people who investigate, not the people who, okay, I don't know what they have done, we'll see. But no investigation. So Israel has to say, first, we want to investigate, and we have to take soldiers to the court. Yeah, probably most of the soldiers made a great job and were defending themselves. Okay, but for sure there were people who did not, and there is no investigation. Second, we have to show that the court is working here. The court doesn't work. The government is against the court, so it doesn't. And third, we have to say that, okay, we want to solve this conflict. We agree to Trump's plan, including Article number 19, future Palestinian. It didn't say state, but
I think it does in point 20, actually, Palestinian statehood. Point 20.
A process.
Process towards statehood.
Well,
Yeah.
after reforms in the Palestinian Authority, recognition in the Palestinian will for right for self-determination and statehood.
Correct.
Well, I can't dispute that. I'm just saying get your story straight to begin with, and understand that to make a point, sometimes you have to concede a point. But for sure, they should be more serious about investigating misdoing by soldiers, and they absolutely need to have a National Inquiry Commission headed by a Supreme Court judge, same as after every catastrophe in Israel. And the government currently is doing everything wrong, beginning with stonewalling and silence on what actually happened, and squelching of investigations, no real intent to have a National Inquiry Commission, and currently they're promoting some narrative where everyone's to blame, including all political parties in Israel, all of it aimed to evade responsibility by the Netanyahu government for the biggest catastrophe ever
what
to fall
the results of all of this is going to be, both for mostly talking about internally in Israel, and maybe, Dan, if you can speak about it externally, okay? So you're talking about, the narratives that need to be told. We're talking about genocide, destruction, everything that people are going to see. In the end of the day, Israelis are going to want to travel in the world, do business, and be proud to be Israelis. Mostly, are they going to be able to do that if the term genocide is being applied to our people? And Dan, if you are a young Jew on a college campus that has already endured 2 years of protests, then what is going to happen? Are you going to start to, rather than reconnect with your Zionist spirit or with Judaism, are you going to now say, I want to get away from it because I don't want anything to do with this, or I'm going to be myself accused of genocide? Most of you start.
For your question, I see that even now, Israelis go everywhere in the world. They are proud, very proud of being Israelis. And maybe there were few incidents, but very, very close to zero incidents against Israelis per se, attacking them because they are Israelis. And unfortunately, as a Zionist, I say that one of the failures of Zionism up to now is that the most problematic place, the most risky place to Jews in the world right now is still here. Not in Europe, not in US, not in Canada, or not everywhere else. And this is a thing that we must change.
Do you agree with this? And answer my question as well.
Look, if in the end the Gaza genocide becomes a thing that is routinely referenced, I think things will get very, very difficult for Israel, including for Israelis living abroad, and in particular, or traveling abroad, and in particular in Europe. For young Jews in America or UK or anywhere else today, there is a dilemma. I would hope that they continue to want to have association with Israel, whether or not it ends up being falsely accused of genocide. I would hope they forgive Israel for whatever emerges as some indisputable crime that might have happened in Gaza, which may be less than genocide, but may still be a crime. For Israelis, for Jews living abroad, by and large, the majority of Jews in the US, for example, they're not ultra-nationalistic and not attached to the ultra-right in Israel, there is a real dilemma because they cannot possibly support the Israel that will emerge from continued rule by the right-wing religious Haredi bloc. There is an apocalyptic war for the future of a political war for the future of Israel that is represented right now in a very acute way by the coming 2026 election. And if it goes in a direction of the right religious bloc, I think this will be the beginning of a divorce between Israel and the Jews of the U.S., by and large, with the exception...
Right after a time when unity was actually at its height.
Of the Orthodox, yes. It may be ironic, but that is where it's going to go. If the opposition wins that election, then a process of healing can begin that maybe will, in the end, even fix the problem, lead to a true partition from the Palestinians under a demilitarized Palestinian state or whatever it ends up being, whatever map it ends up being. But generally, Israel preserving and sustaining its democratic, liberal origins, and then it will be possible, I think, to slowly emerge from this darkness and reestablish the true partnership and even brotherhood and sisterhood with the Jews of the U.S. and
how
the world.
can the Jews of the diaspora help to debunk or to go against this genocide narrative? Is there something that could be happening abroad to help us?
Well, first of all, yeah, I think they should. I mean, if there's going to be a discussion, then they need to be part of that discussion. And it doesn't mean we justify everything Israel's done or even the Gaza war in general. It just means to understand the danger. If this genocide label ends up being attached as one of less than a half dozen in history, because it only began with the Armenian genocide, if it ends up being attached to Israel, they're in big trouble. They have to understand this and join the argument against it. Beyond that, if they want Israel to be a country that can potentially have good relations with the world, they have to get off the fence and understand that supporting Israel is not supporting the current government of Israel. The current government of Israel will lead Israel off a cliff and take many Jews with it.
Moshe, the people who are against the policies of the government or of what we've done in the war have taken to judicial reform before that, have taken to the streets and protested. What can the average Israeli do now to fight for its country? Is there a way for Israelis to somehow take to the streets or take to social networks to debunk some of the myths that Israel is being accused of and say we want to be, responsible, we want to look at what we've done wrong, but maybe also be able to tell the truth?
First, yes, tell the truth. Second, protest, I never saw in the history of the world protest like we saw here in Israel. It's extraordinary. It's great. It is not enough. And yes, we should go on with the protest, but the average Israeli who is against the government, which is more or less 50% of the Israelis, now has to think how we prepare ourselves to elections. Meaning, first, I don't talk about the politicians. They have their work to do. But I think the liberal camp in Israel can win if we solve three questions. First, that all the parties are making it through the threshold. So this is to the politicians, but not only for them, for the average Israeli to go in front of Gantz residence and tell him, you cannot run alone. You have to join somebody. Second, Arab citizens of Israel must be part of this liberal Israelis who want to replace the government. It has to. We have to say that to the Arab citizens, but we have to say that to the Jewish citizens in the liberal, among the liberal in the liberal camp. Many of them don't understand that yet. And third, maybe most important, we saw about what happened to Jews abroad, but right now we don't have Aliyah. We have tens of thousands of Israelis who live every year, and we must. It's not like US that they can vote in the embassy. We must bring here tens or hundreds of thousands of people to vote, and the average Israeli should check who are his family members, who are his friends who live abroad, and to tell them, October 27, we have elections. You have to come to vote, no matter what is the cost of the flight.
So we have literally 30 seconds left to the show. And Dan, I want you to answer one question, 30 seconds, so literally stick to the time. Okay, Israel, people are watching this show and they are these are people who are going to be approached and told Israel has committed genocide in now 15 seconds. What do they need to respond? Give me an answer for them to tell those people?
Genocide is not a lot of people dying in the war. It is an intent to destroy a people. It is very rarely applied in history. It doesn't apply here. There is absolutely a double standard. No one speaks of the Russian genocide of Ukrainians. No one spoke of NATO genocide of Iraqis in Mosul and Syrians in Raqqa. There is absolutely a double standard that Israel is suffering from, and understanding that does not mean you support Netanyahu or support the way the war has been conducted.
Thank you so much. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time today. What an interesting conversation, and really, let's hope for better days. So thank you so much, first to you, Dan, and also to you, Mosi, of course, for being here tonight. For more bold and interesting and exclusive interviews and conversations, you can check out the ILTV podcast, available on YouTube, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Ayan Hoffman. Thanks for watching ILTV Insider. Have a pleasant and safe evening.
And Israeli President Isaac Herzog is currently in Zambia on an official visit to the African nation. He received a warm welcome Monday at the presidential palace, where he held diplomatic meetings and bilateral sessions aimed at strengthening relations. Joining us now with more on this visit and on Israel's broader strategy of deepening ties with African countries is Shiri Fein-Grossman, CEO of the Israel-Africa Relations Institute. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start with the president's current visit. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about the significance of his visit to Zambia?
Yes, this is very an important visit. We haven't had an Israeli president visit Zambia in decades, and the DRC as well. Both the Democratic Republic of Congo, or in short DRC, and Zambia, which is planned as part of the plan of the trip, are very important regional countries. Zambia and DRC both enrich in resources. Zambia more on the southern part of the continent, and DRC being in the center of the continent and being the largest country of the continent, and has the most mineral resources in the countries. Some in very high percentage of the world, what's the resource of the world. So both are extremely important, and also both are strong allies of the United States these days, with an infrastructure project, a very big one that is called the Lobito Corridor, which is a project to connect from the Lobito port in Angola to Zambia. A railway that never existed between Zambia and the DRC to the Copper Belt area of the DRC. It's part of this big competition between China and the US over resources and minerals. So I view it as Israel aligning with U.S. interests, but both Israel's interests, and really strengthening its friendships on the continent. And I have to say, DRC and Zambia are strong supporters of Israel. We've just seen the reopening of an Israeli embassy in Lusaka in Zambia after many years, and we at the Israel-Africa Relations Institute have recommended to do so and to open more embassies throughout Africa. So this is a very exciting and happy day for us as well.
So absolutely, and Africa is an area that, I mean, has largely been neglected by the Israeli government, for example, in the past few decades. But there is a renewed push already from a few years ago to try and improve, to try and deepen relations. I mean, what can you tell us about this and about the importance of Israeli-African relations, especially at a time, you know, when we see some of Israel's relations with other countries that have soured?
Exactly. The time is now. Everybody's competing over Africa's friendship. We talk a lot about the Abraham Accords and its importance. Unfortunately, we talk a lot about a whole lot more, and sometimes I speak about it as well. But actually, the GCC countries are fighting over partnerships in Africa. UAE is currently the greatest, the biggest investor, more than China, in Africa. So everybody's now rushing to be Africa's friends, and Israel should definitely be in the game. Historically, our relationship with Africa started 3,000 years ago with the Queen of Sheba visiting King Solomon, up to Golda Meir and Ben Gurion's strategy of helping the young countries. Although Israel was only a young country, it really gave its hand to kind of help the new countries in Africa out of colonialism and to help it grow.
So from an historic relationship to a modern day one, Shiri Fein-Grossman, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And today we once again have the pleasure of hearing from Yael Eckstein, president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, as she brings us the latest highlights and inspiring updates from the fellowship's ongoing work.
Shalom from here in Israel. I'm Yael Eckstein, and here are 2 fellowship projects that you should know about this week. Number 1, the fellowship learned that in the city of Tiberias, there were many people who were suffering from food insecurity. After 2 years of war, there were people suffering. They couldn't afford food, and they couldn't find basic food items. And so the fellowship opened up a soup kitchen. And so now, in the city of Tiberias, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is distributing over 150 food boxes every single day to people in need. Number 2, I want you to meet Valentina. She's 85 years old, and she's just one of so many people who get helped by the fellowship. She's been living alone for over 2 years since her husband died. She has no one to visit her, no one to help her, and we learned recently she doesn't have enough to buy both her medications, to pay her rent, and to buy food. And every single month, a volunteer delivers to Valentina a food box with everything that she needs. This is saving lives physically and spiritually. Well, there you have it, friends. There are 2 fellowship projects that you now know about. Join me next week, same place, same time, for more updates on what's happening here in the Holy Land at the fellowship. Shalom.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments across Israel and the region. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas announced they would be transferring an additional hostage body to Israel tonight. The IDF says in Gaza, its forces eliminated 4 terrorists along the Yellow Line. In Rafah, troops spotted armed operatives emerging from underground tunnels. 3 were killed with no injuries to Israeli forces. In Han Yunis, another terrorist who crossed into Israeli-controlled territory was neutralized. These gunmen are among roughly 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding in what the army calls the terror pocket in Rafah. Additional strikes targeted houses and infrastructure used for militant activity as Israel and the U.S. continue discussions on deporting those still in the tunnels. Meanwhile, in the north, the IDF struck multiple Hezbollah terror sites embedded near Lebanese civilians, another example, Israel says, of Hezbollah's use of human shields. Troops also hit an additional terror position as the group attempts to rebuild its capabilities. The IDF says it will continue acting to remove threats on both fronts and defend Israeli communities. Former hostages Aviva and Keith Siegel testified before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, recounting their harrowing experiences in Gaza. Aviva Siegel, held for 51 days, told of young female hostages who were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. She described the trauma these girls faced, including being threatened with death if they spoke out. Aviva's testimony highlighted the brutal conditions and crimes committed against hostages, bringing international attention to Hamas's treatment of captives in Gaza. The Siegel's statements come as part of global efforts to document abuses and seek accountability for the terror attacks of October 7th. Let's take a listen.
I'm a witness of one of the girls that was with us, that the Hamas terrorist took her into the bathroom, told her to get undressed, came into the shower with her, and forced her to do oral sex on her. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was forced to take a shower. She's 16 years old. She's never ever showed anybody her body. The Hamas terrorist just stood there and stared at her and smiled.
One of the terrorists held a pistol to her head and told her that if she does not confess, he will kill her. I don't know what my state of mind was during this time. In retrospect, I feel like the terrorists had complete control over me. They told me what to do and I did it. The memories of the situation that I was in haunt me to this day.
The IDF is carrying out a major two-division exercise in Judea and Samaria, an unprecedented drill aimed at testing operational readiness on Israel's eastern front. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise, which includes the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade, alongside Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. He held a situational briefing with field commanders and emphasized that October 7th changed Israel's security doctrine. Zamir said the new Eastern Division was created as a direct lesson from the war, stressing that the IDF must now neutralize threats before they reach Israel's doorstep, reinforcing forces wherever necessary to prevent the next attack. He also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians after video emerged showing vehicles set on fire near Beit Lid. The U.S. has expressed concern over settler-Palestinian clashes in the West Bank. And on a happy note, Israel's biggest pop star, Noah Kirel, married soccer star Daniel Peretz in a high-profile sunset ceremony in Jaffa. The chuppah was led by Chief Rabbi David Lau. The intimate event hosted 150 family members and close friends, including celebrity musicians and athletes. The celebrations continued Wednesday with a larger party for family and friends, promising dancing and festivities. Kirel and Peretz began dating in the summer of 2023, got engaged in September 2024, and have been celebrating with traditional pre-wedding events, including mikveh immersion, challah bake, and a henna party. The wedding has become one of Israel's most high-profile celebrity events, drawing attention locally and internationally. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. I'm Emily Schrader, and today we're breaking an explosive investigation into how the Islamic Republic of Iran's networks in the United Kingdom have been involved in the Gaza flotilla operation through regime-affiliated supporters working alongside known Hamas operatives on British soil. Plus, we'll be speaking with researcher Orel Tobelem, who brought forward some evidence behind this shocking story. We'll also look at how Israel's tech sector is responding to post-war challenges and the ongoing threat of radicalization in the West. Let's dig in. This week, I want to talk about infiltration and what it looks like when a terror regime builds its front lines inside your own country. Now, for years, the United Kingdom has been a soft target for the Islamic Republic of Iran's influence operations, masquerading as religious charities, cultural missions, and even human rights organizations. But as the documents that we're revealing for the first time today show, the network isn't just about words, it's about infrastructure, cyber, media, money, and yes, propaganda. At the center of this controversy is Shabir Ramtullah Hassan Ali, a British-Iranian engineer trained in comm and a longtime figure of the regime's Press TV and Tasnim News. Also, the point of contact from a regime-affiliated charity in the UK, which explicitly has supported terrorism and which all evidence seems to suggest is a front for the regime itself. For more than a decade, he's been a central node in the Islamic Republic's soft power apparatus in Britain, repackaging Khomeinist ideology for Western audiences under the guise often of social justice. Now, in the recent police report filed to the Metropolitan Police Counterterrorism Unit, Hassan Ali is identified as maintaining direct contact with Zahir Birwawi, a Hamas operative based in London and a key organizer of the most recent Gaza flotillas. Now, the report documents emails in which Hassan Ali requests payment for hosting the Global March to Jerusalem website, the flotilla network's main platform, and claims that he, quote, knocked out 2 Israeli ISPs in Haifa and Tel Aviv, end quote. Documents obtained by JNS, also led by the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission, a registered charity, the Telegraph reported runs summer camps that, in their words, risk radicalizing children through Khomeinist doctrine. The Times has previously exposed him as an Islamic regime propagandist closely linked to Press TV, and now, according to Ozent Analysis, Hassan Ali has regularly traveled to Tehran for conferences in support of the Palestinian Intifada, attended by officials from Hamas and Hezbollah, along with the regime. Now, the concern here is that this is no longer diplomatic subversion. It's operational collaboration between the IRGC's information warfare units and Hamas's media arm, run from the UK under charity status, in broad daylight. Now, of course, we knew that this is happening with the Islamic Center in England, funded by the regime, and even attempts to assassinate or kidnap Iranian dissidents on UK soil. But now there's actual documentation indicating that the Islamic regime was involved with the Gaza flotillas as well. Now, sadly, the truth is that the UK is not just a safe haven for dissidents anymore. It's become a safe haven for the Islamic Republic's enablers. If the UK government continues to look away, it won't just be hosting a regime's propaganda efforts. It will actually be aiding a lot of their activities. And continuing on that theme, clearly our big story of the week, which we can now reveal, is the evidence linking the Islamic Republic's #1 fan in the UK to the Hamas-run Gaza flotilla operations. Now, emails that we obtained between Shabir Hassan Ali, a British-Iranian IT engineer and, of course, regime propagandist, and Hamas's Zahir Birwawi, a London-based Hamas operative, show years of collaboration in running the website for the Global March to Jerusalem, the flotilla network's main propaganda arm. Now, Hassan Ali even wrote in these documents that his system knocked out 2 Israeli ISPs in Haifa and Tel Aviv, which is actually a possible breach of UK cyber laws. He later referred to the project as a serious thorn in the side of the Zionist cult. He also negotiated payment to the tune of thousands of British pounds, on UK soil no less, in exchange for his assistance and services to Hamas operatives, even boasting about how much he helped and what a large role he had in the operation. Now, a separate report filed to the Met Police Counterterrorism Unit detailed how Hassan Ali's work placed him within a network connecting IRGC-linked media operatives and Hamas on UK territory. He was even invited to Tehran for an official Iranian conference in support of that Palestinian Intifada, attended by Khamenei himself, as well as representatives from Hamas, Hezbollah, and other proxy terror organizations, I should say, of the Islamic Republic. Now, this new evidence, or newly revealed evidence, suggests a formal convergence between the IRGC's influence network and the Muslim Brotherhood's Hamas wing operating from the UK. It's not really just infiltration, it's also collaboration. Now, in other news, an Iran-Israel cyber battle is going on behind the scenes. According to a recent report from CTEC, Iranian state-linked hackers have launched a wave of attacks on Israeli critical infrastructure in the past week. And supply chain companies, more than 10 different firms providing IT and digital services to Israeli businesses, were targeted in what investigators describe as a supply chain breaches intended to infiltrate wider networks. Now, one of the highest profile incidents involved the Shamir Medical Center, where Iranian actors breached systems, stole data, and crossed the red line of attacking a hospital. though the disruption was contained fairly early in terms of cyber attacks. Now, the Israeli National Cyber Directorate, working with the Shin Bet and other agencies, credited rapid information sharing for avoiding a much larger digital catastrophe. But make no mistake, it isn't a quiet incident. It's part of a broader Iranian strategy to expand these cyber war capabilities against Israel and its allies as well. By targeting the supply chain providers, the Islamic Republic seeks to gain entry points into Israel's economy, healthcare, and of course, government infrastructure. For Israel, this means two things at once. First, the tech sector has to respond with even greater speed and innovation. Startups and defense firms have to develop cyber defense, AI intelligence threat detection, and resilient systems that at hyper speed. Two, the war is not just in Gaza or Lebanon, it's also digital, global, and invisible. When Iran can attack from Tehran or London or anywhere in between, Israel's tech innovators really become the front line. As one Israeli cyber startup CEO put it, our response to Hamas in Tehran is in code. In a region where aggression comes in missiles and cyber packets, Israel responds by building unbreakable networks, or at least they're working on it. Now, joining us today to break down some of this amazing story about Hassan Ali is Orel Tobelem, a research director at the Forum for Foreign Relations. Orel, thanks so much for joining us on the show today. There's a lot to break down on this topic, a lot of documents that we've obtained. To start, can you walk us through some of this newly revealed evidence, specifically the documents linking Shabir Hassan Ali to Zahir Birwawi and the flotilla network?
Of course. Thank you, Emily, for having me on. Well, as you've said, newly uncovered evidence shows that between August 2016 and January 2017, Mr. Shabir Rahmatullah Hassan Ali, yes, that's right, I know his middle name, UK-based software engineer and Islamic scholar at the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission in the UK, exchanged various emails with Mr. Zahir Birawi, who is a notorious Hamas operative and coordinator for the Freedom Flotilla movement. Now, the correspondence itself pertained to Hassan Ali's services as a server administrator for the Global March to Jerusalem website. It was a highly problematic anti-Israel protest movement that was launched in 2011, and it featured contributions from multiple Islamist terror groups. Now, Birawi has for years been recognized by Israel as a Hamas official living in the UK. And he has risen to prominence in recent months due to his involvement in this year's Flotilla Frenzy, which saw controversial figures such as climate charlatan Greta Thunberg and pro-Hamas French deputy Rima Hassan set sail for Israel and Gaza in total breach of maritime sovereignty of multiple nations. And Birawi has previously been photographed himself alongside senior figures from Hamas, including Ismail Haniyeh, the Politburo leader who was assassinated in Iran last year. Now, in 2012, Jonathan Schanzer from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies identified the numerous associations of the Global March to Jerusalem Movement Central Committee with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic regime in Iran. It was actually reported at the time that the project's board secretary was the late Hossein Sheikh al-Islam, who was a Khomeinist politician. Some might remember him as one of the militants who took part in the hostage-taking of 66 American citizens at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in November 1979. Now, as to the emails that I've recovered, these unmistakably show financial negotiations between Shabir Hassan Ali and Zahir Birawi for maintaining Hamas-linked online infrastructure. Now, in this correspondence, Hassan Ali boasted of cyber operations such as downing Israeli internet service providers, implying offensive cyber activity on UK soil. Now, this may actually amount to a significant breach of the Computer Misuse Act 1990, which is a piece of legislation in the UK that is meant to prevent individuals from engaging in nefarious acts involving a computer. Hassan Ali's admission seems to amount more to a violation of Section 3ZA, but again, that's up to any authorities to decide. But it is very clear that he did attempt to damage human welfare or national security of any country, and that includes the State of Israel. Now, funnily enough, it seems from the actual correspondence that Hassan Ali and Birawi had a falling out during this period, and that Hassan Ali's demands for compensation to the tune of £4,435.72 from Hamas were never actually met. So the server itself was decommissioned shortly after the end of this email chain, and it remains unclear whether Hassan Ali actively took money from Hamas during the time that he was running the server. However, what is clear is that he was operating on their behalf at the request of the Islamic regime in Iran. So these exchanges are significant because they demonstrate cross-sectarian collaboration. A Shia IRGC affiliate working directly with a Sunni Muslim Brotherhood-aligned Hamas representative inside Britain. Right, this forms part of the same network that was actually recently identified in an Adkan investigation this year that exposed Hamas links to European flotilla movements led by Birawi, actually through the Palestinian Conference for Palestinians Abroad and also the Europal Forum. So that's in sum quite a lot of stuff to get into, but some really impressive findings.
Now, you've described this as a bridge operation, or a bridge between IRGC influence operations in the UK and Hamas propaganda. Why is that connection so significant, and what does it mean for the UK's national security?
Of course. So this correspondence itself is very significant because it confirms an operational convergence dating back more than a decade between the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, and Hamas propaganda arms operating under charitable or activist cover in the UK. Now, this is not unknown to British authorities. Actually, in July 2025, there was a report by the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament on Iran that identified the regime's use of proxy networks, cyber assets, and ideological organizations to conduct deniable attacks and influence operations on UK soil. 300 pages on these operations, and curiously, no mention of Hassan Ali, despite the fact that he actually had received significant coverage in the Times in 2020. So I'm a bit concerned that that was an oversight. The email exchange itself illustrates exactly this kind of mechanism. There's IRGC cyber operatives who are cooperating with Hamas propagandists to influence Western audiences. There's a clear and deeply embedded IRGC Muslim Brotherhood nexus in the United Kingdom, operating at subaltern cultural and government levels, and I'll elaborate a bit on this later. Now, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, or FIRS, which came into force in July of 2025, effectively created a two-tier registration scheme for arrangements with individuals or entities to carry out political activities on the behalf of a foreign power in the UK. The enhanced tier list currently includes Iran and Russia. FIRS was actually the product of the National Security Act of 2023. And it introduced more stringent countermeasures around potential espionage or sabotage operations occurring on UK soil. This particular case highlights many security blind spots in FIRS and charity regulation, as these actors often operate under benign labels, but they do so openly.
Now, Orel, we know that the Islamic Republic is the sponsor, the funder of Hamas, despite the fact, of course, that Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood Sunni group and the regime is Shia. What brings these groups together in this context, and how deep is that connection, at least on the propaganda front specifically? I mean, this flotilla operation, which, as we saw, had very little actual humanitarian aid on it in the first place, was branded as nonviolent activists. So why was Hamas involved at all? And what are they doing on a Hamas/IRGC-backed flotilla into a war zone?
Yeah, of course. Well, to answer the first part of your question, that has already received in-depth coverage from Reichman University's International Institute for Counterterrorism. Actually, in a July 2020 report led by Dr. Eitan Azani, who I'm very fortunate to know personally, he talked about the Iranian threat network and the export of the Islamic Revolution through the co-opting of Islamic practices such as da'wah, which is missionary activity. Now, the Iranian threat network itself, or ITN, thrives on pragmatic alliances across sectarian lines when anti-Western or anti-Israeli goals converge. Now, ideologically, both the Muslim Brotherhood and the IRGC share a commitment to the axis of resistance narrative. It's one which totally delegitimizes Israel. It opposes Western hegemony and promotes armed resistance framed as liberation. We know this all too well from all of the protest movements that have been going on across the world, especially for the past 2 years. These groups also share a vociferous desire to intimidate and ultimately exterminate the Jews. Just last week, actually, the Mossad publicly identified a senior IRGC commander, Sardar Amar, as the man responsible for a string of foiled terror plots against Jewish and Israeli targets in Greece, Germany, and Australia in the past 2 years alone. These plans strongly align with the objectives of the Muslim Brotherhood, as once articulated amazingly by their spiritual leader, the late Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who once said in a 2009 interview with the Al Jazeera media network that it was a moral imperative for Muslims to reenact the work of Adolf Hitler. Now, as for these flotilla goers, the flotilla propaganda-branded non-violent activism was in reality a Hamas IRGC influence operation, as has clearly been shown by numerous investigations. And these were designed to delegitimize Israel and launder terror branding into humanitarian imagery. Now, in other words, the IRGC and Muslim Brotherhood nexus recruits political ambulance chasers to their cause. Professional opportunists, always on the lookout for another way to proclaim their moral self-righteousness. So, for example, Hamas is actually not the only IRGC proxy with which Sweden's top sailor, Greta Thunberg, has colluded. In early January, she traveled to Algeria to meet with representatives of the Polisario Front. It's a separatist militia operating in the Moroccan Sahara that is armed by Iran and maintains strong links with Hezbollah cells globally. That the Polisario Front has a track record of recruiting child soldiers and torturing residents of humanitarian camps does not seem to bother people like Ms. Thunberg in the slightest, and why would it? She is a massive hypocrite. Hassan Ali's own emails demonstrate the farcical equivocation of these pro-axis of resistance or even pro-Palestinian activism with pro-peace positions. He refers in his emails to his support for the Global March to Jerusalem project as a thorn in the side of the Zionist cult, while boasting about cyber retaliation and the sabotage of Israeli communication systems. So, after all, what truly unites the extreme left and the Islamist camps is their shared love of unfathomable narcissism.
Now, the emails that we have date back to as late as 2016, 2017. And what really surprised me about reading through these documents is that it was like he was bragging about his involvement, clearly showing in writing how the Islamic Republic was behind this, or at least partially so. Why do you think that nothing has been done by British authorities until now on this issue?
So, Emily, you ask actually a very good question. In 2017, Hassan Ali was invited to attend the 6th International Conference on Palestinian Intifada in Tehran. I've actually obtained a copy of the invitation. This was signed by the General Secretariat of the conference, Hossein Amir Abdullahian, who was one of the individuals who was then killed in May 2024 during the helicopter crash that also claimed the life of then Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi. The conference itself featured numerous senior officials from Hamas, Hezbollah, PIJ, chief among them Naim Alsam, who currently leads the Hezbollah militia in Lebanon. Photographic evidence shows that Hassan Ali did in fact attend this conference, placing him in circles which included sanctioned actors and terrorist leaders. Now, at the time, in 2016 and 17, the prevent and counterterrorism frameworks were focused more on the domestic threat posed by Daesh, also known as ISIS, not Iranian hybrid operations. Now, to its credit, the conservative government at the time stood at the forefront of the global coalition against Daesh, committing hundreds of millions of pounds to the training of Iraqi forces, monitoring British nationals seeking to enlist in jihadist operations abroad, and disrupting the group's financial networks. Additionally, there was institutional hesitation to treat Shia networks as a security concern, compounded by charitable registration protections and fears of attracting claims of Islamophobia. Now, the parliamentary report I mentioned earlier actually does admit that the threat posed to the UK by the Islamic Republic was under-resourced, poorly prioritized, and reactive rather than strategic, with agencies treating it as below Russia and China in importance. Individuals like Hassan Ali, whose televised appearances amounted really to incoherent tirades depicting the United States and Israel as satanic, were considered lower priorities, understandably, than, for instance, the Russian operatives using Novichok on UK soil, or China's APT-10 cyber campaign targeting IT suppliers to steal trade secrets from major British firms. Now, this allowed IRGC proxies and Muslim Brotherhood actors to operate under humanitarian or religious pretexts, largely unchecked. It's likely that Hassan Ali, who appears to be of South Asian origin and was born in January 1971 in Uganda, has exploited his British citizenship to engage in activities that would have drawn far greater scrutiny from the UK immigration or counterterrorism authorities had he not held that status. Still, this remains a serious oversight, especially that a 2012 report from Reichmann's ICT identified Sheikh Shabir Hassan Ali as the main figure of the British Ahlul Bayt Islamic mission, describing him as a supporter of Iran's Islamic Revolution ideology and harboring intense hatred of Israel and the West. This should have encouraged British authorities to look more closely at his activities. For example, his travels to Iran in order to attend Intifada conferences. However, I have hope. Given that his passport is due to expire within a few years, it may be in the best interest of His Majesty's Home Office to decline its renewal.
Now, we know that Hassan Ali heads a charity accused of radicalizing children by the UK government. How are groups like the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission, how are they still allowed to operate under charitable status in the UK? Has any progress at all been made to hold the Islamic Republic accountable? I mean, this isn't the first time that charities that were created and funded by the regime itself were used as fronts.
So this is actually a loophole that the IRGC have found. The Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission, whilst it states in many instances on its website that it operates with charitable activities, it's actually not a registered charity in the UK. There are multiple reports of it promoting Khomeinist ideology and radicalizing British youth, and it still has not been forced to register its activities with the Charity Commission. A July 2025 investigation by The Telegraph actually found that the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission's youth summer camp, Camp Wilaya, funnily enough, had exposed children to pro-Iran and pro-Hamas propaganda, including symbolic glorification of the October 7th attacks. And it had also obligated girls as young as 8 years old to wear the hijab and required segregation of the sexes, all of which was, as they claimed, intended to foster a deeper connection to the Islamic faith. Now, there are ostensibly some charities that are registered, but I'll get on this a bit later. The Times in 2020 revealed that Hassan Ali had developed software for regime-backed organizations, including Press TV and Al-Alam, Iranian state propaganda channels that are currently banned in the UK, yet, as you have pointed out via Twitter, continue to operate seemingly undeterred. We saw this play out just last week during the hateful and violent protest campaign against Professor Michael Ben-Gad at City St. George's University, when masked demonstrators disrupted one of his lectures, and the footage was swiftly supplied to Press TV for maximum online amplification. Nor is this phenomenon actually strictly confined to the Islamic Republic. In late February, an Israeli-Iranian dialogue event at King's College London, featuring my colleague and friend Faiz Alavi, who you know very well, was violently shut down by pro-Palestinian activists, one who was later identified as an open supporter of Muslim Brotherhood militias in Gaza and Sudan. The footage soon appeared on Al Jazeera Egypt, falsely portraying Pfizer as a genocide supporter. One of the protesters, an Egyptian national by the name of Osama Ghanem, who is now indefinitely suspended from the university and is facing deportation, given the revocation of his visa sponsorship, has previously worked for Egyptian companies linked to the Al Jazeera media network. It doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. That's not the end of it. In January last year, the BBC released footage from 2020 to 21 showing participants at the Kanun Tawheed Islamic Youth Center in London chanting death to Israel during a memorial for Qasem Soleimani, the famous IRGC Quds Force commander who helped Bashar al-Assad massacre 500,000 civilians during the Syrian civil war. The clips also included online lectures from Iranian generals denying the Holocaust, calling universities battlefronts for Islamic resistance, and urging British students, I mean, stay with me on this, to end the lives of Jews and Zionists. Now, these events appear to have been co-sponsored by the Islamic Students Association of Britain, whose then secretary, British national Mohammed Hussein Atai Abadi, has been photographed alongside Ali Khamenei in Tehran. The Al Tawhid Charitable Trust, which operates the center, has not been shut down by the charity commissioner. And to the best of my knowledge, nothing has been done to even attempt to punish those involved or indeed to de-radicalize their victims. The persistence of this kind of activity reflects charity commission and Ofcom loopholes, insufficient enforcement of terror financing laws, and an absolute failure to link ideological radicalization in our universities and cultural centers to issues of wider national security.
Now, I want to ask you, Orel, based on your research, how does this case fit into a broader pattern of Islamic Republic operations on Western soil, from foiling terror plots to disinformation networks to infiltration at universities that we've seen? How does it fit into the whole equation?
Well, look, this exemplifies Iran's hybrid warfare model. It uses ideological, cyber, and charitable fronts as part of its global threat network that is focused on the exporting of the Islamic Revolution elsewhere. Now, there have been, for example, at least 15 assassination or kidnap plots by Iran or its proxies on the UK soil since 2022. Iran's proxies, for example, Hezbollah, Houthis, Hamas, they act as force multipliers. They spread influence and destabilization without direct Iranian fingerprints. Hassan Ali's activity falls within the cognitive warfare and interference category. He weaponizes propaganda, cyber activism, and youth outreach to undermine British cohesion and amplify anti-Israel hostility. It's also worth noting that there's no real record of how this guy gets paid. I haven't found any trace of consistent employment anywhere, and so that may be worth looking into. Further, the Iranian regime has increasingly relied on criminal networks to conduct covert operations under the guise of plausible deniability. So it's plotted attacks against US, Israeli, and Jewish targets across Europe and used criminal syndicates to assassinate dissidents. Tehran's trusted enforcer, Naji Sharifi Zindashti, operates networks spanning Iran, Turkey, the UK, and Canada. So he employed figures such as the Canadian Hells Angels to target Iranian exiles and dissidents. Turkish authorities link him to the 2020 abduction of a Swedish-Iranian activist who was later executed in Iran. Now, in January 2024, Sweden's Foxtrot network, led by Rawa Majid, carried out an attack on the Israeli embassy in Stockholm on behalf of Iran. Majid has cooperated directly with Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security, MOIS. Dutch intelligence similarly reports Iran's use of Moroccan criminal clans in the Mokho Mafia to eliminate exiled opponents, with Tehran protecting their leadership in return and killing any key witnesses. There was a very notable case in 2020, I believe, that featured this kind of cooperation. Now, Iranian influence has also seeped into Europe's digital sphere. During the 2024 Amsterdam riots, which were premeditated and intended to create serious damage and possibly kill Jews and Israelis, social media accounts linked to Tehran circulated videos of assaults on Israeli football fans. One particular Snapchat account, labeled as a government organization under the name Mr. Haq, was actually a reference to the Zaydi Shia Islamist party in Yemen, Hizb al-Haq, long associated with the Houthis, and this was among the most active. Now, in May 2025, in the UK, 3 Iranian nationals were charged under the National Security Act for aiding a foreign intelligence service and targeting journalists from Iran International in London. All of them had entered the UK claiming asylum between 2016 and 2022. It has since emerged that the Iranian embassy in London facilitates illegal travel for such refugees, issuing forms that allow secret returns to Iran in exchange for their recruitment as informants. Consider this. A hostile state is weaponizing Britain's asylum system to plant operatives on UK soil, and yet the government has done virtually nothing to stop it.
Now, finally, I want to ask you what needs to happen next. I mean, should the UK pursue designation of these groups as terror groups, or do they need stronger enforcement under the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme?
You know, Emily, the past 2 years especially have shown me one thing, is that Islamist groups interpret half measures as proof of weakness. Incremental responses only encourage deeper infiltration and adaptation. This kind of penetration is now too advanced for gradualism, you know, this kind of carrot-stick approach that British politicians love to do. Decisive, comprehensive action right now is required. The UK has to prescribe the IRGC under the Terrorism Act, ending the legal ambiguity around its operations. Mandatory registration under the FRS scheme for organizations and individuals linked to foreign regimes must happen. This includes the Ahlul Bayt Islamic Mission. It also includes the Islamic Center of England, which daily broadcasts messages from Ali Khamenei in Tehran, and is also curiously located about 100 meters away from a Jewish primary school in Maida Vale. If this kind of problem persists, the government should move to close any Islamic centers that are found to be supporting IRGC activity for reasons of public safety. There is actually an international precedent for this. In July 2024, the German government shut down the Islamic Center in Hamburg over its ties to Iran and Hezbollah and its promotion of radical Islamism. As the Interior Minister at the time, Nancy Faeser, stated, the IZH served as the direct representative of Iran's supreme leader, spreading aggressive anti-Semitism and seeking to exploit the Islamic Revolution. So why should we in the UK tolerate similar activity on our soil when Germany does not? Now, if that doesn't work, several European states, including most recently Australia, have previously expelled Iranian diplomats for espionage and activities incompatible with their diplomatic status. The UK should pursue the expulsion of implicated diplomatic staff and an independent investigation into the Islamic Republic's recruitment of informants and targeting of journalists. If hostile intelligence operations are continuing to happen on UK soil, then unfortunately for the Islamic regime in Iran, the UK government must force the closure of the Republic's embassy in London. It's something that they've done in 2011 previously when the British embassy in Iran was attacked by a mob of Basiji regime loyalists. Finally, the UK has to treat ideological radicalization as a national security threat and not merely a matter of community relations or anti-Semitism. And this applies whether it's the IRGC or the Muslim Brotherhood or any other extremist group. The horrific Yom Kippur attack in Manchester that was carried out by British Syrian Jihad al-Shami should have been recognized for what it was, an act of jihad. Instead, the Prime Minister's decision to dismiss it as the work of, I believe the quote was, one vile individual, trivialized the murder of 2 British Jews during a day of worship and signaled a dangerous unwillingness to confront the deeper ideological roots of such violence. The UK has to shift from crisis response to long-term deterrence. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen under the present Labour government. Let's just take, for example, David Lammy, who is now the Deputy Prime Minister to the UK following a recent cabinet reshuffle. He used to be the Foreign Secretary. David Lammy, a decade ago or so, appeared on a UK game show in which, in response to a question about who succeeded Henry VIII, the English monarch Henry VIII, he responded, Henry VII. I think that we cannot continue to reward idiocy consistently and then be surprised when we are ruled over by idiots. And so there has to be some kind of action on this front, whether that's a general election that hopefully will land us with a different government. I certainly hope so. But it's clear that we cannot go on like this.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Aurel, for your work on this important topic and for breaking down some of the findings in recent weeks. I'm sure we'll continue to see more as the months and years continue.
Thank you very much, Emily.
In any case, for now, we want to move on to our good, bad, and ugly stories of the week. As always, feel free to suggest your stories for this segment. You can DM me on X, Emily K. Schrader, and we'll do our best to get it in the show. For now, however, we'll finish up with the good, the bad, and the ugly. First things first, our good story of the week. The IDF foiled an IRGC-linked smuggling ring attempting to move drone components into the West Bank. Security sources say it was part of the regime's effort to build a micro-Hezbollah inside Judea and Samaria. And this time, they were caught red-handed. This is, of course, hardly the first time. They're also actively trying to build up Hezbollah again, which is why we've seen a continued small-scale operations targeting Hezbollah sites inside southern Lebanon. And while it's disturbing this is happening, obviously we have to applaud the IDF for foiling yet another attempt to export the Islamic Republic's terror operations. And keeping to our theme of this week, British universities are still accepting funding from pro-Iranian regime foundations, some of which actually being used as fronts by the regime, and also Qatar-linked institutions, despite clear warnings from the UK government. The UK's Intelligence and Security Committee, in a July 2025 report, states that the Islamic Republic, quote, almost certainly conducts espionage campaigns targeting academia in the UK. And it's not just about money. It's also about access data and propaganda on campus. Sponsored research can provide regime-linked actors backdoor entry into sensitive technology, disciplines, and infrastructure, according to the UK government. If universities continue to take these funds without strict scrutiny or without declaring it, Britain's highest learning institutions risk being an unwitting front line for foreign influence and intelligence operations. And our ugly story of this week comes from, you guessed it, London, where a Hamas-affiliated cleric delivered a sermon recently praising the martyrs of the sea, his words, referring to that Gaza flotilla operations inside an Islamic center linked to the Ahlul Bayt network. That's that same network connected to Shabir Hassan Ali's charity and the Islamic Republic of Iran's propaganda machine. It's also received more than £400,000 in UK government funding under the guise of community cohesion. Now, this was exposed by The Times in July 2025, and the incident shows how the Islamic Republic's ideological infrastructure in the UK is bleeding radicalization and even recruitment on British soil, unfortunately using taxpayer money to promote this Khomeinist propaganda. Well, that's it for this week on Axis of Truth. We'll be back soon with more interviews and more stories from the Middle East. We'll continue to keep you updated on the latest from this story as the new documentation sheds light on the partnership between Hamas and the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'm Emily Schrader. Be sure to follow me on social media, Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv. Thank you for watching and see you next week on Axis of Truth.
And on a different note, we have with us in studio Shmuel Saket, the founder of the Dream Raffle. He joined us here in the studio last year when the Dream Raffle captured so much attention. And now it's back for its 8th edition, featuring a $1.2 million Jerusalem apartment and an early bird bonus ending November 17th. Shmuel, great to have you back with us.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Shmuel, what's the idea behind the Dream Raffle? Tell us about it and how it has grown since we last spoke to you at ILTV.
There are a lot of Jewish organizations that raise money. As you know, you need to raise funds in order to function, in order to support the projects that you sponsor and so on. But we decided to raise money with a twist, and that is to give people the opportunity to fulfill their dream. That's why we call it the Dream Raffle. And by purchasing just one ticket, obviously you can purchase more, but enough is one ticket, you can win a $1.2 million brand new, fully furnished apartment in the heart of Jerusalem.
Wow.
That's a dream, and it's a raffle, the Dream Raffle.
So now this year's prize is huge. What can people win? Maybe elaborate on this apartment if there are other prizes. And what's special about this early bird offer before November 17th?
So first of all, the raffle will be held around Purim time. So people always say, oh, buy in February. Why should I buy now? Because there are going to be several early bird raffles along the way. Mm-hmm. The first one is November 17th, which is a $15,000 prize, cash prize. Someone could win that and also win the apartment. And if they don't, it rolls over to the next one. There's going to be another bonus raffle as well. So the earlier you buy, you're in additional raffles at no extra cost. That's number one. Number two, what's new this year is the apartment is fully furnished. We hired a professional interior designer, and she furnished the place. You can literally win the apartment at 11:30 and move in at 11:31. There's the refrigerator, the stove, the oven, the dining room set, chairs, couch. There's a sukkah. All the mezuzot are there. Bedroom furniture, closets. It's ready for the winner to move in immediately. The Dream Raffle.
Wow, that is a dream indeed. Now, where does the money from the raffle go, and how do you make sure that the whole process is fair and transparent?
So this is our 8th year, and we're very, very careful to really have full and complete transparency. The winning ticket is always picked live. We do it in front of an audience. We do it live. We live stream it all over the internet so people could see that there's no great Yiddish word, feilishtik, any problems or anything that we don't do that, 100% transparent. And what we do is we give the option to someone to either win the apartment or if for whatever reason they don't want the apartment, $600,000 cash. Not bad for a $200 ticket. And again, this is yours forever. You could pass it to your inheritors. You could live in it, sell it, Airbnb, whatever you want. It is your apartment in the heart of Yerushalayim. No other raffle does this. And on our website, we have a list of all the previous winners. There are other raffles, I don't want to say names, who don't have this transparency. We do. You could see the winners. I interview every one of them. They're real people, whether they were from New Jersey, San Diego, California, or here in Israel. They're all real people winning this raffle, and that has changed their life.
That's incredible, Shmuel. Thank you very much. Scan the QR code on your screen right now. It takes 60 seconds. One entry could win you a home in Israel, and every ticket supports incredible organizations. And ILTV viewers, you get a bonus entry. Just use the code ILTV.
And as Israel continues to mourn the fallen hostages whose bodies have been returning over the past few weeks, one name that has again captured the nation's attention is Hadar Goldin. Goldin, who was an officer in the IDF, was killed and taken into Gaza during the 2014 war. His remains were returned this week, allowing his family and the country to finally lay him to rest. Our correspondent, India Naftali, is live in Hostage Square with more. India, what can you tell us?
Yes, Lidar, I'm here in Hostage Square, where flags and posters are still being hung in honor of the fallen hostages who still have not been returned. One of those fallen hostages who did return this week is, of course, Hadar Goldin, whose funeral happened this morning at the Kfar Saba Military Cemetery. Now, they already had a funeral for him back in 2014 when they had enough proof of death to hold the ceremony, but now that his body's returned, they're giving him a proper burial. It's a somber morning of closure in the city of Kfar Saba in central Israel. Thousands attended the funeral of IDF soldier Hadar Goldin. 11 years have passed since he fell in battle in southern Gaza during Operation Protective Edge. His place of burial was declared as unknown. The 23-year-old soldier was killed in 2014 when Hamas terrorists ambushed his unit in a tunnel attack. His body was kidnapped and held hostage in the Gaza Strip for more than a decade. Today, his family, friends, and commanders gathered to honor his memory. At the funeral, IDF Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir made a powerful declaration that Operation Protective Edge is finally over.
בהצדעה ובהרכנת ראש אנחנו מלווים היום את הדר בדרכו האחרונה שלה היה ראוי מזמן. לוחמי סיירת גבעתי, חברי הצוות של הדר, לחמתם לצידו במבצע צוק איתן. התגייסתם ונלחמתם גם במערכה הנוכחית בגבורה. לכם, כמו לצה"ל כולו ולמדינה, המעגל נסגר. מבצע צוק איתן הסתיים.
Hadar's mother traveled the world advocating for his release, even speaking before the UN. Here's what she shared today about how they persevered for so long.
הדר, חיכינו לך 11 שנים. זה המון זמן. המון. אין לי באמת הסבר איך עשינו את זה, חוץ שבכל רגע ששקענו, היה מישהו במשפחה ואומר, היה קופץ ואומר, אבל מה הדר היה אומר? בדרך כלל זו הייתה איילת. אז אנחנו פה בגלל כל מה שהשארת לנו, כל הוראות ההפעלה שלך, ומי שאתה.
The ceremony reflected Israel's deep-rooted commitment to never leave a soldier behind. It's a national promise that every fallen troop will be brought home, no matter how long it takes. Hadar Goldin, who became a symbol of this principle, has finally been laid to rest.
And on our final stop in the Golan Heights, for our series we've been bringing you all week long, we are bringing you a taste of Druze cuisine and how the community believes that they can be the bridge in making peace in the region. Let's take a look. When you step inside Nasiba's Druze restaurant in Bukata in the Golan Heights, you'll quickly realize the space is much more than eating.
How the food?
You're actually stepping into this Druze chef's home, not as a customer, but as her guest.
From the Golan Heights.
She invites guests into her home for a traditional meal, sitting on the floor and close to the fireplace. Local tour guide and Druze activist Maya Farhat brought us here to experience the authentic cuisine ourselves.
How do you want them to feel when they come into this space and they taste your food?
Special experience. To eat, also to speak about the truth.
Her Druze cuisine, inspired by her Syrian roots, is all handmade, locally sourced, filled with vegetables, and the crowd favorite, kebab. What you'll quickly learn about the Druze community is their incredible belief of spreading coexistence through their traditions and sharing them with others. That's why our final stop was to Vered's home.
This is the welcoming coffee. We offer you coffee and we offer you some sweet. Because if we share food together, it means we are family.
This is Maya's grandmother's original home.
This is Vered. She was a kid here. In 1967, the soldiers came for the first visit in the Golan. And for a surprise, they had also Druze soldiers with them. So they explained to them that everything was okay. There's no need to be frightened. Everything is fine. You can go back to your houses. We're gonna keep you safe. They even helped them taking back their belongings. And so Vered said her famous line. She said that if this is what Jewish people are people who are worth living with. I want my family to live in peace with this country. Her children and her belongings and came back and opened this house. Families like mine, families who accepted the citizenship later on, identified as Israelis, they were Boy Scouted. They weren't acceptable. They weren't able to go to rituals. It was so important to me to turn this weakness into power.
This is the traditional Druze home, right?
The houses here were built from basalt, volcanic rocks.
The family preserved this home to keep Vered's message alive of peace and honoring and teaching their culture to others.
Would you like to become a Druze bride? This is the tarbush. It's usually with real gold. Wow. This is what they give for the bride, the gift. This is traditional. You will see this still in Sueda, in Syria.
And of course, moments to capture for eternity. Maya's father, Vered's son,
how should I offer you the coffee?
Also taught us Druze coffee is not just a drink, rather a way to communicate.
Pick it in your right hand. If you shake the cup like this, I have to stop.
Wow.
That means for you enough. Wow. Shake it, please. Okay, that's it. That's enough.
From the beautiful work of Druze artisans and artifacts they preserved, Maya and her father Talea believe Druze in the Golan Heights can be the bridge to peace in the Middle East.
We have to end wars. What I believe that here in this crazy Middle East, it must be done. Should be like a treaty of life assigned by all the people in the Middle East.
I think everyone in the world should come and pay a visit to the Golan Heights to know what harmony is and what connection is. Druze people might be a minority, but it is the strongest minority in the whole world. They know how to build bridges between nations with other people on the other sides of the border.
And in other news, Americans for Ben Gurion University has launched the David Ben Gurion Speaks, an AI-powered video series that brings Israel's founding prime minister to life. Let's take a look.
I am David Ben Gurion, and 50 years after my death, my namesake, Ben Gurion University, has bloomed into an oasis of innovation in the Negev desert. 20,000 students on campuses in Be'er Sheva, Sdei Boker, and Eilat study desert and water resource, sustainable drylands, alternative energy, global health, medical breakthroughs, robotics, and fields unknown in my time, nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity. My friends, it is not enough to be up to date. You have to be up to tomorrow. Israel's future was rising from the Negev, just as I had envisioned. And so they came to destroy it.
And now moving on, for decades, Jewish National Fund USA has been investing in the northern part of Israel, working to bring thousands of people back to the region. Now, one of their new unique ventures will bring a totally new skill set to the region with a culinary institute. Last week, I sat down with CEO Russell Robinson about what this could mean for Israel.
If you look out, close your eyes, open them, you're in Tuscany. This is a magnificent, beautiful nation, and here's a magnificent, beautiful area of the country.
The breathtaking views of northern Israel can oftentimes make you feel like you're in another part of the world. When you are here on Kibbutz Gonen, tell me what this feels like for you as someone who's so involved in making sure people do come back to the north.
I see the beauty and the life and the tranquility, all the things that maybe you don't use in words in describing anything in Israel sometimes. You can literally hear cars driving from miles away because it's so quiet. The animals and the beauty of the area and the tranquility of it. And you see from the people there's a spirit of Hautzim. These are people that helped build this nation from the very beginning. And then you get to see that, you know what, when you plant, you can see the fruits of your labor.
For Jewish National Fund USA CEO Russell Robinson, he's had a vision to continue to turn the north of Israel into thriving communities before and after October 7th.
For us, it was always about go north, bringing people up north. October 7th and the war, we had to, shift, but not change. We had to pivot, but we're still heading forward. And we're heading forward that we are bringing people back home.
Bringing people home and bringing people to the region with new opportunities and putting it on the map. That's the goal of JNF USA. And here on Kibbutz Gonen, in the upper eastern Galilee, there's a vision to bring something new to the table, literally speaking.
Here in Kibbutz Gonen, we started something of a reimagination 7 years ago to build the Galilee Culinary Institute, the finest institute in the world. Now that's a big statement. You got Cordon Bleu, you got CIA and America Culinary Institute of America. How could we claim to have the finest? I'll tell you how. They're fine opportunities to learn French cooking.
Overlooking the vast farms in the distance and ridge of Kibbutz Gonen sits the soon-to-be JNF's Galilee Culinary Institute.
This building will have our bakery. This building will have our winery. It'll have a beer brewery. You're going to be utilizing the beauty of Israel and the experience of Israel as part of the whole culinary teaching experience. So it's not that you come here and you're going to learn only because what we're going to teach you. You're going to learn from everything that goes on here throughout Israel.
Robinson gave us a tour of where the 12-month program will take place, which will soon transform into all different types of culinary spaces.
So you've just walked in the Galilee Culinary Institute restaurant. This is where the chefs from all over the world that have come here to teach, students who have come from all over the world have come here to learn.
JNF USA also established brand new dorms on the kibbutz for culinary students to live in. Robinson met with crews to tour the nearly finished product, where he was able to see the sleek designs and eco-friendly spaces.
So every dorm will have a little kitchenette, refrigerator, a kitchenette, a microwave. Okay, and every bed has storage underneath as well.
JNF USA envisions the Culinary Institute to be instrumental in bringing more life to the ever-growing city of Kiryat Shmona and its surrounding communities. With their investment in entrepreneurs, medical facilities, to pre-military programs in the region and more, the nonprofit is hoping the area expands with each opportunity that's created.
Israel tomorrow is what Israel's all about. A light up to nations, and it's going to be that place that people are going to say, wow, I should have bought a home there before.
What an exciting moment to be on Kibbutz Gonen, seeing so much to come for them.
Welcome back to ILTV on the Hour. We're live from Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines. I'm Sivan Raviv, and here is your roundup of the latest developments across Israel and the region. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas announced they would be transferring an additional hostage body to Israel tonight. The IDF says in Gaza, its forces eliminated 4 terrorists along the Yellow Line. In Rafah, troops spotted armed operatives emerging from underground tunnels. 3 were killed with no injuries to Israeli forces. In Han Yunis, another terrorist who crossed into Israeli-controlled territory was neutralized. These gunmen are among roughly 200 Hamas terrorists still hiding in what the army calls the terror pocket in Rafah. Additional strikes targeted houses and infrastructure used for militant activity as Israel and the U.S. continue discussions on deporting those still in the tunnels. Meanwhile, in the north, the IDF struck multiple Hezbollah terror sites embedded near Lebanese civilians, another example, Israel says, of Hezbollah's use of human shields. Troops also hit an additional terror position as the group attempts to rebuild its capabilities. The IDF says it will continue acting to remove threats on both fronts and defend Israeli communities. Former hostages Aviva and Keith Siegel testified before the UN Committee Against Torture in Geneva, recounting their harrowing experiences in Gaza. Aviva Siegel, held for 51 days, told of young female hostages who were repeatedly sexually assaulted by Hamas terrorists. She described the trauma these girls faced, including being threatened with death if they spoke out. Aviva's testimony highlighted the brutal conditions and crimes committed against hostages, bringing international attention to Hamas's treatment of captives in Gaza. The Siegel's statements come as part of global efforts to document abuses and seek accountability for the terror attacks of October 7th. Let's take a listen.
I'm a witness of one of the girls that was with us, that the Hamas terrorist took her into the bathroom, told her to get undressed, came into the shower with her, and forced her to do oral sex on her. I'm a witness of one of the girls that was forced to take a shower. She's 16 years old. She's never ever showed anybody her body. The Hamas terrorist just stood there and stared at her and smiled.
One of the terrorists held a pistol to her head and told her that if she does not confess, he will kill her. I don't know what my state of mind was during this time. In retrospect, I feel like the terrorists had complete control over me. They told me what to do and I did it. The memories of the situation that I was in haunt me to this day.
The IDF is carrying out a major 2-division exercise in Judea and Samaria, an unprecedented drill aimed at testing operational readiness on Israel's eastern front. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir visited the exercise, which includes the Judea and Samaria Division and the Gilad Brigade, alongside Central Command Chief Avi Bluth. He held a situational briefing with field commanders and emphasized that October 7th changed Israel's security doctrine. Zamir said the new Eastern Division was created as a direct lesson from the war, stressing that the IDF must now neutralize threats before they reach Israel's doorstep, reinforcing forces wherever necessary to prevent the next attack. He also condemned recent violent incidents in which extremist Israeli civilians attacked Palestinians after video emerged showing vehicles set on fire near Beit Lid. The U.S. has expressed concern over settler-Palestinian clashes in the West Bank. And on a happy note, Israel's biggest pop star, Noah Kirel, married soccer star Daniel Peretz in a high-profile sunset ceremony in Jaffa. The chuppah was led by Chief Rabbi David Lau. The intimate event hosted 150 family members and close friends, including celebrity musicians and athletes. The celebrations continued Wednesday with a larger party for family and friends, promising dancing and festivities. Kirel and Peretz began dating in the summer of 2023, got engaged in September 2024, and have been celebrating with traditional pre-wedding events including mikveh immersion, challah bake, and a henna party. The wedding has become one of Israel's most high-profile celebrity events, drawing attention locally and internationally. That's a wrap for this edition of ILTV on the Hour. Stay with us throughout the day for updates coming out of Israel and the Middle East. I'm Sivan Raviv. Thank you very much for watching.
Welcome to the second episode of One on One, a special series brought to you by ILTV in partnership with Israel Bonds. I'm Lidar Grave-Lazi. In each episode, we sit down with fascinating personalities from around the world for an intimate conversation about their lives, passions, and connection to Israel. Whether you're tuning in from across the globe or right here at home, our goal is to inspire, inform, and bring you close to the people making an impact. Today's guest is someone whose work has captured the hearts of millions. Nathaniel Buzolik, also known as Nate Buzz, is an accomplished actor best known for his roles in hit series like The Vampire Diaries, The Originals, and Pretty Little Liars. But beyond his acting career, Nate is a passionate advocate for Israel, a committed voice against anti-Semitism, and an outspoken supporter of Jewish heritage and history. His journey has taken him from Hollywood sets to the streets of Jerusalem, and today we'll explore the experiences that have shaped both the artist and the activist. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So your career began on the big screen, on the small screen, far away from the streets of Jerusalem. But what was that moment or experience for you that first sparked your sort of deep connection to Israel?
Yeah, it's actually quite a complicated journey that ultimately led me to where I am today and the position that I've chosen to stand in. If we backtrack, my mum was born in Egypt in a refugee camp. She's a first-generation Australian, and I grew up in a very low social economic sort of community in Sydney, Australia. And the predominant ethnicity that was surrounding me when I was growing up was actually Arab. So I grew up in a very, very, prominent Muslim Arab area in Sydney, Australia. My next door neighbours were Lebanese and Palestinian, and on the other side, Syrian, and there was a lot of Iraqis. So my exposure to the Middle East actually started from a very, very young age. I remember when I was a child, I'd jump the fence and I would celebrate Ramadan with my neighbours. It was a common thing, and everyone was speaking Arabic. And then at 27, at the beginning of my Hollywood career, I was fortunate enough to get a really amazing role on a TV series called The Vampire Diaries, which you talked about. I hit sort of a low point in my life, I guess, to a degree, and what it means to sort of pursue your dream and what that means in terms of a satisfaction to the soul. I was asking a lot of questions, and series of events led me to becoming a Christian. So that was in 2012. By 2016, series of events, I ended up in Iraq. I was volunteering with a non-profit bringing emergency aid to people fleeing ISIS. And I saw firsthand the atrocities and violence of what radical Islam is capable of doing. At that time, it was the Yazidi community that was deeply affected, and very similar things to what we saw on October 7th. And I hit a point in my life in 2016 where I was kind of done with the world. And I remember calling out to Hashem, to God, and saying, take my life. I don't think I want it anymore. I was working on a TV show. I was in Iraq. I was hearing horrific stories about, what radical Islam has done to many people, whether they were kidnapped, taken into Mosul, watched their family members be executed in front of them, women being raped or kidnapped. And I mean, we even saw recently there was a young Yazidi girl that was rescued from Gaza who was originally from Iraq. And that's actually a cousin of one of the young Yazidi boys that I met in Iraq back in 2016. And all I remember in that moment of time where I was crying out to God saying, this world is corrupt, it's ugly, I feel no purpose to what I'm doing. I said, take my life. I remember hearing a voice that was as clear as day, but it was speaking to the depths of my heart, and it simply said, if you're that willing to give up your life, give it to me, what's the difference? And so in Iraq, on a dusty field, I felt as if God was speaking to me and challenging me on the direction of my life. At that point in my Christian journey, I'd never really read the Bible. It's bits and pieces. As most Christians, they go to church, they hear what the pastor says. And I went back to the US after that moment of time, and I read the entire Torah, the Tanakh, and the New Testament in 28 days.
Wow.
And after I'd finished reading it, one word stood out that I couldn't get out of my head. I would think about it all the time. I would ponder the reality of what this word means and represents in the kingdom of God. And the word was Israel. You know, after reading the entire Bible in such a short amount of time, I realized that God has this deep, covenantal, unbreakable bond, not only to a people, but also to a land. And shortly after that, one day I was in church and I heard the very same voice that spoke to me in Iraq and said, go to Israel. So that was in 2017. I was obviously very obedient to, you know, that calling, and I came, and the original goal was to understand the Jewishness of Jesus. But when I got here, I was faced with the discrepancy between everything I'd learned from my Arab friends and Muslim community that I grew up with about Israel and the Jewish people, never having much engagement with Jews as a teenager and in my early years as an adult, to what was unfolding on the ground. And there was just a difference between what they were saying and what was really going on. And I guess that's kind of where the journey started, to try and understand what is Israel, who are these collection of people who are uniquely different to every other people group in the world, which is obviously the Jewish identity. And yeah, that's where the sort of journey started back in 2017.
So it's an incredible journey, incredible story to hear the start of the journey. And since then, of course, your journey's continued here. And I do want to ask, you know, since that initial moment where you sort of heard or came to Israel, what is it about Israel, its people, its culture, its history that sort of really resonates with you on a personal level?
Many things. I mean, look, what I've witnessed over the past 22 months is a true testament to the spirit of the Jewish identity. You know, I often speak around the world to different Jewish communities in light of October 7th. And, you know, one thing I often say at the beginning of many of my talks, when I'm addressing, you know, whether it's a synagogue or a large Jewish audience or a Jewish organization, is the Jewish people, by and large, are a people who have been hated by all, but loved by one. And they've been hated by nations, empires, kingdoms, dictators. And the one that loves them is the divine, you know, Hashem. And you can see it, even in the darkness. And, you know, for the Christians who are watching this, I think we're actually living in, you know, profoundly powerful and biblical times that if you understood the Word of God and you understood the text, you would know exactly what's unfolding before our eyes, where many are, I would say, spiritually blind. You know, and sometimes it's hard to make sense of anti-Semitism that we're seeing around the world, and it's illogical because it's a spiritual battle, not a physical battle that we've been witnessing. And that's why I think many of us are in shock at what we're seeing unfold around the world, from the response of governments, the response of, you know, non-profits, the response of certain groups who you would think have nothing in common with radical Islam, but all of a sudden they're building these strange alliances.
Israel Bonds is the most direct and impactful way to invest in Israel's future. So if you want to invest in what matters most to you, you can invest in Israel with Israel Bonds. Scan the QR code to invest now. You've been one of the most outspoken, I would say, advocates of the Jewish people of Israel, especially since October 7th. Now, you could have chosen to stay quiet, especially, you know, doing the work that you do in your industry in Hollywood, but you've chosen to speak out on behalf of the Jewish people, on behalf of the state of Israel. Why?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I follow the Messiah. You know, I follow Yeshua, and I'm the kind of person that I'm not a 50-50 person. I'm all in on anything I commit myself to in life. And the one lesson that I think I take from what Yeshua taught his disciples 2,000 years ago, when he was trying to unpack the kingdom of heaven and unpack who he was, what he was trying to achieve, but more than that, to try and give them the correct understanding of how we operate in a fallen world. He says this to his disciples: there's no greater form of love than one laying down his life for a friend. Now, ultimately, Yeshua does that in a way where he's laying down his life so that we can be reconciled with a perfect God in our imperfection of our sin. But for me to model that, it means that I sometimes have to lay down my life in order to show what love really looks like. Now, a lot of people have taken very, very strong stands over the past 22 months, particularly for the pro-Palestinian side. You know, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, the Dan Bilzerians of this world who have massive influence, but yet we can look at them and we can ask the question, it's benefiting their personal cause to stand the way that they have. Even Piers Morgan, to a degree, it's like a paycheck for them. And it's picking the bigger side because you know the bigger side's going to have a much more favourable return on investment. Now, any person who stands with Israel in 2025, you're going to be hated, you're going to be persecuted, and it's going to come at a cost. And for me, it's a way that I can show the Jewish people a love that they haven't experienced from many people. If I'm willing to lay down my life in the sense of losing my career, losing my future work opportunities, risking, parts of my life, even in my comfort, I've experienced a lot of hatred for what I say, what I'm willing to say, and how strong I'm willing to stand on the fact that I'm a Zionist. And I'm not ashamed of that. And I think all Christians should be Zionists at heart, because it's impossible to read through the entire Bible and not see that God's intention is a people and a land, and he doesn't finish until he's got the job done. And there's something that God is doing with his people. I mean, 1948 for me is a biblical marker where God was making declarations to the nations that his covenant to Abraham still stands. And for us as Christians, we need to actually look at that, celebrate that, and also know that if God's promise is that the Jewish people will return to the land, just as he said in Isaiah 11, and that they've returned, then whatever is fighting against that is not only anti-God, it's anti-Christ. It's anti-Messiah. It's anti-promises of what Hashem has said to a people for thousands of years. And that's why, as simply put, you look at the framework and the ideologies of the pro-Palestinian movement. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. We want all of it. In fact, just moments before I got here, I was doing an interview with Ohad Ben Ami, who was in Gaza for 491 days. And I was able to sit down and have a very, very long conversation with him about his experiences, which were just truly, truly unbelievable. But you realize that this is a battle where they want to take everything. And one thing that he realized while he was in Gaza is they're not interested in coexistence. They're not interested in peace. They want all of it, and that's the only way it's going to go. And so that becomes a biblical battle. And I think for Christians watching, there's no middle seat. There's no option to be like, I just want to love both sides and I just want to love all people. And I have a heart for Palestinians, but I also frame my compassion and care for Palestinians under the understanding that their aggression causes their suffering. And the moment they stop their aggression and their violence, their suffering will also end. Some people in Gaza are also hostages. They're hostages to Hamas. But until we can acknowledge that and accept that, then, I think Christians have to really make a strong choice.
It is truly an existential battle, I think, that Israel is fighting today and that it's been fighting for decades. And, you talked a little bit about the cost of standing up for Israel. And so I do want to ask you what sort of personal price you've paid for taking a stand, standing and speaking out on behalf of the state of Israel.
Yeah, there's a very superficial loss, which is I probably imagine my Hollywood career is pretty much done and dusted. I'm just so vocal about this. I haven't kind of taken a sort of backseat, and I would imagine any producer who's reviewing my audition tape, whose ultimate goal is to have a successful show so they can make money. They're not going to put me in a TV show or a series or a movie that could jeopardize the success of a film because I could get boycotted, people could be opposed to my message, they'll call me, a genocide supporter or any false, accusation that they tend to make about how I feel about this current conflict. So I realize that's done. So, the 20 years of my life building a career goes like this. There's a personal cost. I get a lot of death threats, obviously. many, many death threats. Some of them have been very serious, and I've had to take real precautions. There's been situations. I mean, I was even with Noah Aragami,
yeah.
And we got into arguments with people on the street in Vancouver, and people would actually argue with her about the state of Gaza, having never been there, and face to face with a hostage who had been in Gaza and experienced that firsthand, and people still wanted to argue. And there were moments where people wanted to be physical, So there's situations like that. But all that aside, I take you back to what I started with in Iraq. When I said to Hashem, "It's yours," it wasn't poetic. It wasn't, okay, well, it's yours for a period of time. I really meant what I said to him. I made that promise. And, I put this up on my social media the other day. I'm here until every single hostage comes home. And, I guess this is just the personality that God shaped me with. And I feel like sometimes in life you choose a purpose, and sometimes in life a purpose is chosen for you, and you get to decide if you're going to walk down that road.
Were you surprised by sort of this hate, this backlash?
Not at all.
Did any of it surprise you?
No, because I understand the Bible. I understand it very well. I think that's the thing that's given me the most clarity. Whether you're a Jew or you're a Christian, when you read God's word, it presents and sets patterns that help us understand everything that's before our eyes. The first murder in the Torah, in the book of Bereshit, Cain kills his brother Abel out of jealousy. And it's always an interesting thing because, how does that play into what we're looking at in our world today? Well, the world has become deeply jealous and envious of the idea that God chose a people. Just as God chose Abel, God also chose Abraham, and through Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov, he created this nation, and they're his chosen people. And God himself says, "My covenant with Israel will not be broken. As long as the sun rises and the sun sets and the ordinance of nature continue to operate as they have, my covenant to Israel is not broken." Now, as a Christian or as a Jew reading that, you go, okay, he's made a direct promise. And the other thing that God talks about, in fact, one of the prophets, which is a prophet called Zechariah, in Zechariah 12, God is speaking, and as he enters into this speech, he actually outlines his credentials. He says, "I'm the creator of the universe. I'm the one who put breath into man, and I'm about to tell you something, so listen." And he says, a day is coming where Jerusalem will become like this heavy stone for the nations that they can't move, and they don't know what to do with it. And when you and I sit here today, we know that Jerusalem is ultimately the centerpiece of this entire story. Whose capital is it? Who does it belong to? Who is the rightful owner of it, and who should have sovereignty over it? That's what the fight about. Even October 7th, when Hamas invaded Israel, their ultimate goal was the Alaska flood. So it all goes back to this place. But God goes on to say that every single nation will rise up against Jerusalem and Judah. Now, the identity of Judah has become what we would define as the Jewish identity today, right? The tribe that God has regathered and put back into the land, just as he promised in Isaiah, and just as he said in Amos chapter number 9 at the very back end, when God's making a declaration, he says, "I'm going to rebuild David's sukkah." But he also says this, which is so beautiful and profound. He says, "Once I've put them back in the land, never again will I pluck them out." And it's a declaration of Adonai. So for those who read the Bible, you're like, okay, here are the promises I understand. Covenantal relationship with the Jewish people, which is unconditional, because when Abraham was making this covenantal relationship with God, Abraham was asleep. He says they're going to be returned a second time in the land. When they're returned in the land, they're never going to be plucked out again. And then he hears in Zechariah that every nation's going to rise up against Judah and Jerusalem. Now, let's say you and I lived 250 years ago, and we're reading this text, and you and I are contemplating what that means and what that represents. First of all, there's no Israel. So we're like, how's that going to happen? And then the next question I guess you and I would ask, so let's say if God recreates and rebirths Israel into this modern state that we have today, how is every single nation going to oppose How is every single nation going to stand against them? Like, yes, maybe Lebanon, maybe Egypt, maybe Syria, but every nation? Couldn't be. But what we've witnessed over the last 22 months, the deception, the lies, and the manipulation of the pro-Palestinian movement to convince the world to oppose the Jew, to vilify Israel, it's starting to look like the roadmap. And it's scary, right? It's a scary thing. Like, is this what leads the world to hate the Jew? Their presence back in the land and their right to defend themselves against radical, violent Islamists who only want to conquer all things. And we're looking at it, and it's a scary thought. Now, the next question you might ask me is, well, are you not scared then? Is this not the moment of time where you think, well, if this is it, I better step back and clear the way? Who wins? Who ultimately gets the final say? And this is where we go back to the Torah. We go back to the Tanakh. And I would make the argument in the book of Job. It's a wisdom book. It's one of the only books that they say was written by Moses. And we hear this unconventional story about a righteous man suffering. And the question is, why does Job suffer? Doesn't make sense. He didn't do anything wrong. And his friends come and they give him all this advice. Well, you must have sinned. You must have done this. Maybe you don't realize and you've done, and it's your fault. And everyone's trying to blame Job. And at the end of the story, God shows up. And we have these powerful chapters where then finally God speaks. And the amazing thing is God's the last one to speak. And God never answers the question why Job suffered. But what we actually learn is that through Job's suffering, we get to know the sovereignty, the power, the majesty of who God is. And so for me as a Christian, for me as a believer in the God of Israel, I look at it like this. Ultimately, you and I are about to witness the showdown between humanity and Hashem. And I know Hashem is going to win. So I'm going to stand with him even though it looks like this is going to be a big loss. Because I know he gets the final say, and I know that he's going to make every single wrong right, and he's going to bring justice to those who deserve justice. He's going to vindicate those who have been falsely accused, and he's going to bring wrath on those who did wickedness in this world.
It's a very powerful message. And, you know, when you care so deeply about someone or something, you don't just support it, you invest everything in it as you're doing. And so I want to just end with one final question and ask, you know, if you could inspire others to invest their money, their time, you know, their voice in Israel and its people and its future, you know, what would you tell them? And what's the one thing that you hope will stay with them long after this conversation?
It's incredible what one person can do with the right attitude. I have one job. It's not for me. It's not for Israel. It's not even for the Jewish identity. It's to glorify the God of Israel. And, you know, it's one of those situations where I want to be a voice in the wilderness. It's not, you know, I don't want any glory for this. And often it's almost uncomfortable how many people come to me in Israel and thank me. And often I try and say, hey, don't thank me, thank Hashem. Because without him, I couldn't do it. But I think for those who want to do something, first of all, know it's going to cost you. And that's the price of love. But love only becomes powerful when you're willing to lose. That's where love has power. If I'm just here to gain, there's no power in that. But when you're actually willing to lose and elevate the name above all names, for me, it's Yeshua. He will guide you, he will lead you, and he will take you to places and do things in your life where you could only describe it as a miracle. Let me give you one example, and this is how we'll finish. I told you I came to Israel in 2017 for the first time. And when I came, I was on a mission, discover the Jewishness of Jesus, and answer the call that was given to me back in Iraq. Now, I always think it's interesting because Abraham also originally comes from Iraq in his story, and he's on a journey to come to the Promised Land. So in some sort of roundabout way, I've kind of gone on some sort of, you know, Abrahamic journey, starting in Iraq, being called to build a relationship with a voice and a God who I didn't really fully understand. And so when I got here for the first time, I knew that there was a purpose to what I was doing, but I didn't understand what it was. And the very first photo that I posted from Israel is still on my Instagram today. You can scroll all the way back. You can find it. It's on the 8th of May, 2017. And I was at Caesarea Maritime. It's a picture of me facing a sunset. And I put up on a caption that I knew I was here for a purpose. I was giving thanks and glory to God. And I put in a hashtag, Holy Land Purpose Tour. Now, why is that important? And why is the date important? You may or may not be aware that in 2024, I was given a huge honor and privilege to light the torch on Independence Day. How do you describe it in Israel? What's the correct?
Hamesua.
Hamesua, right? So I got given this honor to be a torchbearer on one of the most powerful days as a nation. And I'm the first non-Israeli, non-Jewish person to do it in history. So you've had some Israelis and you've had some Jews, but you've never had a non-Israeli, non-Jewish person do it before. So it was a historical moment that they would allow me to do that. But more than that, for me, it was personally a powerful moment because I was given an honor to be part of a nation that I've fallen in love with. Now, that was in 2024. If you do the math, back to 2017, it's 7 years. Impressive. On the cab ride home, I was thinking about that. Wow, it's been 7 years since I first came into Israel, not knowing a single Jew, not understanding a single thing about the Jewish people, and not knowing anything about this land or how everything has unfolded over the last 77 years. And over 7 years, God taught me and poured into me, and I had many, many amazing people that have come along that journey. Israelis, Jews, just incredible, incredible people, friends that I consider family. And I'm on the cab ride home and I think about that first photo I took. So I went back into my phone and I scrolled and I looked at the date and it was the 8th of May, 2017. And I looked at the day that I lit the torch and it was the 8th of May, 2024. 7 years to the day. Coincidence? Sure. But to me, God was telling me something. He was saying, you may not understand what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, but I'm going to show you something in your own life that if you trust me, I'm going to take you to a place that you didn't even think was possible. And so I trust God so much now. You know, and for me, it's like, what can I do to glorify his name more if he could do all this with me over a period of time where I didn't fully understand what he's doing? How much more could I do in a period of time where I'm like, I trust you, Hashem? And I think the most important thing now for me is to elevate the voices of the voiceless, which are the hostages. This is where we should be right now. Anyone watching this, the first prayer of every single day and the last prayer of every single day should have the names of the hostages who still remain in Gaza, because they are the first victims from October 7th, and they're the first victims to be forgotten about by mainstream media, by NGOs, by the Red Cross, sometimes even by this government. So we need to bring them back into the conversation, and we need to make sure that every single one of them comes home. And that's where my heart is. I said to myself, when the last one comes home, take a break.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And in a world that can sometimes feel like a sea of voices, Nate's voice is so important, and his advocacy for the state of Israel and the Jewish people makes a real difference. So thank you, Nate, for speaking up, for standing up for what matters, and thank you for reminding us that when we stand up for what matters, we can inspire others to do the same. So you've heard what it means to speak out for Israel. Now let's talk about what it means to invest in it. Our sponsor, Israel Bonds, the Development Corporation for Israel, has raised over $55 billion for the Jewish state since 1951. At the heart of that impact are individuals like our next guest. Josh Rubens is a member of the Israel Bonds National Board of Directors, and he's here to share how investing in Israel isn't just a financial choice, it's a personal one. Josh, welcome.
Thank you, Ladar. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Josh, what first got you involved with Israel Bonds? Was there a moment when it really sort of clicked for you, when you realized this was something you wanted to be a part of?
In 2011, I had moved to Miami. I was a young lawyer, and I was looking to get involved with a pro-Israel organization. And I happened to meet a couple other individuals that were working with Israel Bond's staff to relaunch the Young Professionals Division in Miami. And there was 4 of us, along with a staff member, that kicked off the division. And since 2011, I've been closely involved with Bonds, and it's been an amazing ride. So for about 15 years, I've held leadership positions throughout the organization, and in January 2023, I joined the organization's board of directors. And it's been a pleasure and a privilege to really be involved closely with Israel Bonds for the last 15 years. It's very meaningful, and I know that my time and effort as a volunteer has hopefully made a meaningful impact for the organization.
Now, a lot of people think of investing as something sort of strictly financial, but with Israel Bonds, there's clearly something more behind it. How do you see it as a reflection of your values?
Being involved with the State of Israel to help Israel achieve its goals and its mission has been very, very rewarding. And knowing that I'm contributing to help Israel reach the many Jews in the diaspora here in the United States and abroad, it's a worthwhile cause, and it's very fulfilling to know that these efforts have helped create the success that Israel Bonds has been able to achieve over the last 75 years.
And for someone who cares about Israel but hasn't thought about investing this way, what would you say to them?
I would say that becoming a stakeholder through Israel Bonds is very, very meaningful. And it's meaningful because not only can you purchase a bond and have a financial interest, but you can show your support in your community. You can get involved in Israel Bonds events. Israel Bonds has many different divisions for lay leaders to get involved, and I'm a product of that. I've been involved, as I said, since 2011, and been involved in many volunteer capacities, from the Young Professionals Division to the Legal Division to the Campaign Advisory Council. And so Israel Bonds not only lets you participate as a stakeholder, as someone who holds direct securities in the State of Israel, but also offers a lot of volunteer opportunities to get involved.
Thank you, Josh. What a powerful reminder that support for Israel doesn't stop at words. Whether you're raising your voice or putting your dollars to work, there are many ways to show up for what matters.
Thanks for having me, Ladar.
This has been One on One. I'm Ladar Gravelazi. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Welcome to ILTV's podcast. Joining us today are 2 students from the University of Haifa and University of Haifa International, Aiden and Daniela. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So why don't we start by you introducing yourselves, telling us a little bit about where you're from, what brought you to Israel. So Aiden, let's start with you.
Sure. So my name's Aiden Siegel. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Making Aliyah was a dream of mine since the moment I first stepped foot on Israeli soil about 5 years ago, and I'm happy to be here today to say that my dream came true.
Incredible. And just a little fun fact, I also am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So
Amazing.
Small world. And Daniela, what about you?
So my name is Daniela Florea. I'm 25 years old and coming from Bucharest, Romania. And I would say that my dream was to move also to Israel from the first time I came here, because it was everything so different, so from the language to culture to overall vibe. And I remember the first feeling I had was like, oh my God, I want to live here and I want to be surrounded by this cool environment and I want to challenge myself and to learn new things.
Incredible. So why did you choose the University of Haifa specifically?
So first of all, University of Haifa, I chose the University of Haifa because I like the idea of studying in the top of the mountain, especially with this hot area from here. And it had all the programs. It had the program that I was interested in, which was the diplomacy track. And I also heard from Israelis that it's a respected university, so it just supported my idea of coming here.
Absolutely. And Aiden, what about you? Why did you choose University of Haifa?
Well, I knew I was going to be living in Haifa because my brother-in-law and my sister live here, and I wanted to be close to them. I also wanted to give myself time to sort of acclimate because my Hebrew was and still is pretty limited. I didn't have a job lined up, and I just had the savings from the job I previously had to make it work here. So when I found out about the University of Haifa International School and that they offered a program in Israel Studies, I knew that this would be a really good launching pad for my career and for me to make a life as an Israeli here.
So walk us through a little bit what it's like to be a University of Haifa International master's student.
Sure. So in the dorms, it's a rich mix of different cultures, of language, of scents and foods. It really gives you a unique perspective, and it challenges your preconceived notions about the world when you get to have conversations and make new friends with people from countries you probably would have never otherwise met. And I think that challenge it extends to the classroom as well. Certainly I have my own ideas about Israel, but it's very rewarding to be in the same classroom and be taught by professors who really have prestige in this field, and to provide us with new texts, new thinkers, and new ideas about a country that there's really just so much to learn about.
Mm-hmm. And Daniela, what about you? Walk us through sort of what it's like a day in the life of a U of Haifa International student.
So first of all, I'm a very active person. I always have to do something, and I'm always rushing, as you know that. And for me, being an international student in Haifa, it feeds this part of me of being active. There's always something to do, always something to learn about, or even in social activities or just educational level, there's always some activities and trips or just things to do in the university. There's always something to do. So I would say that it's very active. It's a very active lifestyle here.
Mm-hmm. And so, Didi, I want to ask, because, this podcast is really about sort of what you're studying, what you're doing at the University of Haifa, because both of you are involved in some pretty interesting areas. So, Didi, I want to start with you. Before we dive into sort of the coursework and what you're doing, you're connected to EcoPeace Middle East. Can you tell us what that is?
So, very interesting. I discovered this non-governmental organization in a field trip from the university, organized by the university to the Knesset. And one of the speakers was from EcoPeace Middle East. And I heard them speak, and I had that click. I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And that was the moment I learned about climate diplomacy. And for a while, I knew that I want to do something in diplomacy, but I didn't find my thing. So that was the click, the instant click. So I contacted them and asked them to do an internship, and after a couple of interviews they accepted me, and it was really, really interesting. I did the internship for 10 months. For the first 3 months were during before the war, mm-hmm. and after the rest of the months was during the war. And I applied for I was an intern for the project management program, but I just want to mention that it was for me so fruitful and educational to be surrounded by people during the beginning of the war, because as a student, this is how you learn, and I was surrounded by educated people, and they taught me how to be forgiving, full of love, to think of how to build the peace with everything that I do. So I think it was the best period to be surrounded by this kind of people.
Absolutely. Couldn't have been easy to be here, especially as a foreign student.
Yes.
After October 7th. And, you mentioned this idea of climate diplomacy, which ties into your studies. But I want to understand, what exactly is climate diplomacy, and, how do you hope to work in that field? What exactly do you do?
So, as I mentioned, I learned about climate diplomacy from EcoPeace, and I thought that it's so fascinating how we can use Mother Earth to create peace. Even though it's not maybe the first choice for everybody, there is a tool that you can take it and build peace with it. So I learned this from Israel and how it makes it really nice and smart with the neighbors that we have.
And so, Aiden, let's turn to you now, because you're also studying, that might seem maybe a little bit obvious in Israel studies. Why did you choose this specific path?
I think the simple answer is Israel is sort of what makes me tick. It's my favorite subject. I truly believe that there's no greater drama than the emergence of the State of Israel in 1948. And there's so many different angles that you can study it from, politically, theologically, culturally. And I think that even if it's just a drop in the water, it gives me a voice and a feeling that I can make a meaningful contribution to a country that I really care about.
So you talk a lot about your love from Israel. Where did this love come from?
I think it was always in the backdrop. Certainly my parents instilled a love for Israel in me. I went to Hebrew school, and Israel became a part of my Jewish identity. But I think the more, the deeper answer, and maybe the more interesting one, is that it comes from my Bobi, from my paternal grandmother, whom I never had the chance to meet because she passed away before I was born. But my family likes to compare me to her because she also had a fierce love for Israel and also a talent for writing. And like me, would oftentimes submit articles and letters to the editor in newspapers where she felt that Israel needed to be defended and had needed a voice to represent her. And I think in many ways Israel is that shared love that enables me to connect on a deeper level to a really special person whom I've never had the chance to meet.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your love of reading, your love of writing, especially about Jewish and Israeli history. We were speaking beforehand. You also said you like classic rock records and graphic design. So how do you tie all of this together?
Well, I mean, I think specifically collecting Israeli rock records is actually like owning a piece of Jewish history. It's also a really fun way to learn Hebrew. As for graphic design, it's just something I really do for fun, but it's really hard not to be inspired to create when you live in a city like Haifa. There's just so many beautiful sites. There's murals everywhere you go. There's just so much subject matter that can really inspire you to want to design something.
Mm-hmm. And so, how are you taking all of this love for Israel, all of your hobbies, how are you sort of tying that into your studies at the University of Haifa?
Well, I think first and foremost, I consider myself a writer. And I think that after October 7th and throughout the war, if there's one thing that I'd be able to contribute to this country, I think that it would be my ability to set the story straight about Israel. As for graphic design, I don't really have any career aspirations for it, but who knows, if the writing career doesn't work out, maybe it's graphic design.
Mm-hmm. So setting the record straight about Israel, something that's definitely needed today. So, we've covered sort of a little bit about yourselves. We've covered your studies at Haifa University. Now I want to ask you both a little bit about your experiences here in Israel as a whole. Moving to Israel can be a bit of a culture shock, especially for people from Europe, the United States. Can you maybe share with us a little bit, sort of what's the biggest culture shock that you experienced when you moved to Israel?
Definitely the bureaucracy. I think all Olim Chadashim would probably agree with me on that. In Haifa, it would definitely be just as helpful to